Welcome to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast with your host, legendary powerlifter and strength athlete, Chad Ikes. For most, the journey of strength starts in the gym, but should inevitably expand through all aspects of life. Join us as we discuss all things strength. Now, here's your host, Chad Ikes.
Hey, everybody. We got a really good podcast coming up. I'm super excited for. We have AJ Roberts back, who just recently hit 1,000-pound bench. And we happened to be talking the other day, and he did one major change that had a huge impact on him. And the whole time we were texting back and forth, I'm like, oh, shit, dude, this is one of those conversations that I learned so much in my powerlifting. And I asked him, I go, hey, can we stop here and like do this on record? And he luckily agreed to it. So I think I've been excited about this one like for the last couple days. And so let's get into it. So you go to the Arnold, and like, so how long has it been since you like started competing? It's been like a year, hasn't it?
2 years. So
2 years.
basically after Louis passed away, I was due to go back to Columbus, Ohio to see Louis and see Luke Edwards because he was still dealing with his issues. And so I want to go back there, and I was going to go for the Arnold, and then I didn't go for the Arnold, and then Louis passed away. And it was really hard on me because in my head I'm like, why didn't I go see Louis? And the truth is that like I hadn't trained in 6 years. So like what do I have to offer Louis? Like me going to see Louis, like I wasn't his kid, I wasn't his son, I wasn't a friend, like I was an athlete, right? And
Mhm.
I look like, yes, you have relationships with coaches, but they move on. They have the next squad of people. And so for me, it was like, if I go back, like, what do I have to offer the gym? Like, I'm not going to train. Like, I don't train. So it's not like I'm going to go there and train. So I was like, I kept trying to like justify, like, oh, I need to get in shape or I need to do this or before I go. So after he passed, of course, I said, you know what, I'm just going to go because maybe Luke won't make it, And so Laura was having the women's pro-am. She had a little tribute to Louis. So I went out to that. When I was sat there watching these women and the numbers, I hadn't followed the sport in a long time. Leah Ragman was going for 1,000-pound squat. Amber Hansen squatted 800. There was a couple other girls that squatted 800. Just phenomenal numbers, just
Yeah.
blew me away. And the whole time I thought, man, like all Louis would have ever wanted is for me to be the strongest version of myself, right? All Louis would ever want is for me to lift. Like that's kind of like he talked a lot about guys who were older that like kind of stopped lifting. He was like, that's their death sentence, And so I was at that point mentally where I was like, I was probably in the worst mental shape I'd ever been because I hadn't done anything for 6 years. So my self-confidence, my view, my self-worth, all of that, like I was kind of searching for like how to be normal. Like, how do I be normal? And I try to work out, I try to do this, I try to do that, but I just could never stick to it. So while I was sitting there at the competition, I just realized I was like, this is like the iron bug bit me again, just like it did when I was a teenager. And I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to compete. And I was 340 pounds of pretty much Jabba the Hutt looking, because I hadn't done anything in 6 years. And we were talking just before we went on, mainly like I was probably 270. I floated between 265, 275 for a long time. Then COVID hit and I ballooned up to 340. And I had a lot of work stress, then COVID stress, kids at home, all of that stuff, right?
Mhm.
So while I was there, I was like, I'm going to compete again. And Rita West was there too, and she was like, hey, I have a bench meet like invitation. I'd love for that to be your first comeback meet. And I said, sure, I'll do it, right? And so I set the goal to be 308 so that I forced myself to lose weight to go compete, being that that's what I used to compete in. And so my goal was never to be bench only, but as I got back into training, I realized my body, I've got like injuries and things from the past that like haven't allowed me to get my squat and deadlift back. But yeah, it's been 2 years and I set that 1,000-pound goal. Like, if I'm going to come back, what do I do? And I didn't know anything about the band shirts or anything like that at the time. So like when I started looking at the numbers, I saw all these guys benching 1,000. I'm like, what the heck? And I was like,
Yeah. When
okay,
did that become kind of more normal?
exactly. So I had a 910 bench. I was like, you know what? If I could just come back and like even be close to that, I'll be happy. And so that was the beginning of it. And I did Rita's meet and managed to bench 915. And it's just super interesting that this journey that I've been on. But yeah, the Arnold kind of, it all came together, and I actually competed in the XBC Worlds meet at the Arnold. I wasn't on any of the main stages because the format of the competitions, you and I did the Olympia, for reps, and we both got injured during that. Last year I did the Arnold last man standing, which you start at 750, you go 758, 859. You can't skip any weights. And so first of all, you got to figure out what shirts you're going to use, because the shirt you bench, but shirt I benched 1,000, and there's no way I could touch for 750. So that was a challenge. But I got injured in that as well, right? Like it's just a lot of reps with a lot of weight. So this year I was like, I really just want to compete in a regular competition, and luckily the XBC is there, and they do an amazing job. Danny Daig's really honed that over the. I think he's been doing it for 10 years now, so he's really got that down. It was a great environment, and everything came together.
So I almost forgot, because my shoulders finally healed up. I forgot that I got hurt. Like, injuries are just part of it to me. I don't even really give them much thought anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what we were talking about, is how it came together. So you opened with, what did you open with?
With 880. So my whole career, I've always tried to open between, I go off percentage. So I usually, whatever I want to hit at the competition, I'll open at 87.5% of that. Then I'll go to 93, 95%. Then I'll go to the 100, right? And usually I know kind of roughly what that 100% is based on my training. So it's not like I'm just like throwing a random number out there and being like, that's what I'm going to do. It's like what I actually think I can get. And so I opened at 880, and then the weight came up so fast that I got red lights, and I couldn't understand why. But what happened was my shoulders, like I literally lifted off the bench and came back down. So my arms never bent, but the barbell did go up and down because of the acceleration. So I benched up and my shoulders come up and I go back down. And so I don't know technically if that should have been red lights, but from a judging standpoint, they probably couldn't tell. They saw the barbell go up and down. So I wasn't going to argue with anybody. I just went back and said, okay, what do I do? Well, I knew that if I got 880, I would win. And so that's like twofold of competing, right? There's PRs, there's, lifetime goals that you've set, and then there's just winning. And so I'm like, you know what, let's get winning out of the way first, right? Like looking at what everybody else is doing. Everybody else was open around 800. So I said, okay, they might go for 9, but like, if I get 880, I got a good shot at just winning. Plus, I have this like thought process that the last thing you want to do is struggle with a lift, right? And so missing and then jumping, like, what if I had done the same thing with the next weight, right? Like, I didn't really know what the issue was. I was like, okay, like, I know I could do 880 easy all day long. So let's just go again. Let's slow it down instead of like slamming it up. Let's just, push and lock it and hold it. So that's what I did. And then that decision came, okay, like, what do you do next? And so I knew I could get a PR, and that I was thinking between 940, 950. Based on my training going into the competition, like I legitimately was not doing the Arnold 2 weeks out. I didn't have a plane ticket. Luke had said I could stay with him. So I knew that if I wanted to go, I had somewhere to stay. I'd already paid the entry fee a long time ago. So like I was going to eat that. But in training,
why were you thinking you weren't going to do it?
So after my last competition, it took until the beginning of the year, so after Christmas, for me to feel healthy again. So I haven't had a lot of shirt sessions going into this. And what I found is that I can only go in my shirt about every 10 to 14 days. So I can't go weekly in the shirt. So with that schedule, it's basically I go every 2 weeks in the shirt, right? Because I'm not with my training partners. Like I don't have training partners there on Wednesday and Saturday. So it's like, we started doing our shirt bench on Saturday. That's when everybody's there. That's when I go in the shirt, but I'm going every other week. Right. So coming off of the thing, when I did the days, it's at the beginning of March and it's the beginning of January. And I'm going, man, I only got like 4 shirt sessions here, like to get this right. So, I got a coffin bench, like 3 weeks out from 3 weeks out from the Arnold. And I spent before I started training, I wanted to use it. So I tried to change the pad out on the bench. And I faffed around with that for an hour and a half, only to figure out that the holes weren't drilled, not in the pad, but the way the bench is made is different than the normal, like the way Anyway, the pad was on, but it was like too low where your head would fall off the top. So I'm like, oh, I
Mhm.
got to move the holes in the pad. And so I took it off, put it back. And then I had to do my workout. Well, I was rushed for time. So I went up in the shirt. I usually take 50-pound jumps. I'm jumping red, 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 red. I get up in less than an hour. I'm up to my working sets, 800, 850. I go 950 off of a three board. And bear in mind, the last training cycle, I did 1,000 off of a three board, a two board, and a one board, right? So working way down. So I missed 950. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. So I talked to Rob, and like in retrospect, like the whole training session should have just been a wash. I should not even like I was very stressed out from the pad. You know how it goes. The bolt, one bolt like got threaded, so like we had to figure out how to get that out, and it was just this nightmare experience. Then I'm trying to train, doesn't go right. I'm rushing everything. Don't have my normal training partners there. But for me, I was like, oh, like I'm nowhere close to where I was. Like, and so I talked to Rob, and he kind of was like, well, where's your body weight at? And so I brought my body weight down under 300 for this whole training cycle, planning to compete and then go. I was gonna go 275 at the Arnold. That was the original plan. So here we are 2 weeks out. I'm like 295. I'm talking to Rob. He's like, but you're in the same shirt as you were in, right? And I goes, yeah. He's like, dude, like you've lost, like you were 312 the last competition. Like, that's a lot of weight to be down. And so we talked, and I said, okay, well, fuck it. I'll just push my weight up and see how it goes and see what I can do. So a week and a half out, well, 2 weeks out, a week and a half out, I did the 950 off of a board. And it went and it felt okay. And I said, okay, I think I can go and do a PR. And so, but I was like, man, do I really want to spend all that money? Do I really want to go if I'm just going to get a PR? I'm not going to go get the 1,000. And do I really want to spend time away from my family at this investment? And so I talked to my wife and my best friend and a couple other people. And, they all basically said, like, this could be the last time you compete. Like, you have no idea. Like, you could be injured. You could, like this could be the last opportunity to go to the Arnold as a lifter. And I thought about it. I'm 38. I'll turn 39 in next week. And I was like, you know what? They're right. Like I like to think I'm going to lift for as long as I can, but I don't know what that timeline is. Like these opportunities don't come around. Like, you signed up, you should just go. So there I am, second attempt now, right? So after all of that, I finally am there. Second attempt, I'm going, do I go for a PR or do I go for what I really came for? Because the goal was 880, 940, 950, then 1,000. I said to Luke, I just looked at him, I said, let's just go for it, man. Like, let's just go for it. And I had Luke there, Matt Smith there, Dustin Minks was there. My training partner that I train with here, Shane, he was there. So I had like my crew there. And I knew I was in good hands. I felt really good under the barbell warming up, like the best I'd felt for a long time. And I was 380, I weighed in at 312 and I was 318 the day of. I'm drinking Element salts and as many as I can to get as big a bloat as I can. There's an IV unit there. So I'm sat in the Arnold getting an IV that, we used to hide in the hotel rooms getting them. Now I'm just sitting in the Arnold
Yeah,
Expo. Like,
isn't it weird?
it's crazy, right? But I'm like loving it, right? Because I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. I'm gonna get nice and bloated. My shirt's gonna be real, and it was everything. It was just the way it should be. So warming up, I kind of had this like confidence, and then I knew I needed to find that other gear, and I went to a place I hadn't been to since 2012. I let the dragon, so to speak, out. And if you've seen the video, if not, you can see it on my IG. But like I'm almost frothing at the mouth. I mean, and kind of if you've ever seen Chad lift, like that was the intensity before. I had the same thing. And in fact, at one point I knew I needed to calm myself down. So I walked up to the barbell, I like shook the barbell, like bitch your mind, and the barbell flexed real easy. So I felt real strong. And then I turned around and let out a little yell just to bring myself down and calm myself down laying down. Cause you still have to have your mind about you. But Matt Smith handed that weight out and they let go of it. And I just thought, this doesn't feel too heavy in my hands like normal. Like, cause normally, I kid you not, and pretty much like in them shirts, like you don't have the support you have. So you almost kind of, you've tried one. you
Yeah.
almost kind of like get the barbell and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. And then you come down and you're like, goes up and you're like, oh, okay. Like,
It's
and everyone's like,
really
that rocketed. And you're
weird.
like, oh, did it? It felt real heavy.
It's really weird compared to the shirts we wore.
Yeah. It doesn't load the same. So it's like, it
Yeah.
just feels heavy. So anyway, weight comes down, I start to press. And every time I've tried 1,000, the last meet was the closest I got. I got a little pop, but like I knew like I knew it wasn't going. Every other meet, like I've come down and the shirts have just not, they've just not worked. And I've been like, what is like, I've tried different combos, different layers, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4, 2 layers plus 2 layers. I've tried all these different things. And I was just like, I'm just weak. I'm not strong enough. I'm not strong enough. And so I got the press command, and the minute it's like the minute it popped, I was like, oh, this is going. Like it was like this is going. And now the adrenaline and everything makes like it looked, everyone says it looks easy, all of that. I felt great after everybody's asking me how I felt. I felt good. I don't have any injuries, nothing. But about 11 o'clock that night, basically everything started hurting. And the next day, I couldn't lift my arm up over my head and all of that. I think the adrenaline,
It's still a
where it
fucking
had gone
thousand
to.
pounds.
Yeah. And so, but after that lift, like I was in the back, everybody's coming up congratulating me. And like I cried with joy. And I've never ever shed a tear in my entire powerlifting career, not even when I broke the world record, right? It's just part of this is what I do. And, I cried with joy because like for me, and I just said the words, I did it. Like I did it. Like I can be done. Like, not saying I'm gonna be done, but I can be done. Like for me,
Mhm.
it's like I proved what I needed to prove to myself. And I've been working with Jay and Blakely a little bit on just like trying to understand like why I needed this comeback and what it means to me and who I am and things like that.
Love
And
that
it's
shit.
just interesting that like, normally your life is full of heroes' journeys and you complete it and you move on. And, I think I did a pretty good job with the hero's journey in powerlifting, getting to the
Hmm.
top and walking away and doing good in business. But, here I am starting on this thing again. And it's like, I just knew I'd missed something. I missed something. And, to be able to go back and go through everything I've gone through to get to where it was and really prove to myself, like, I not only have it inside of me, but I also know what I'm talking about and like can train myself and understand what it takes. Um, it was just overwhelming almost at the end of that lift to be like, the fuck, I just did this. Like, and I did it in like record time compared to because I said I wanted to do it before I was 40,
Yeah.
and I did it a year in advance. So, it's still something that I'm like, for the first time, I don't celebrate a lot of victories. But for the first time ever, I'm like so happy about it. Like it's odd. It's just like it's like fulfilling, you know?
It's not odd to me. Maybe that's what you were missing,
Yeah.
is that you didn't ever celebrate it.
Yeah.
So you were just so focused on what's next, what's next, what's next, that you didn't enjoy it. And this time you got to enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because my one wife wasn't there, but she was watching on the live stream, and she's like, "Man, that went up so easy, 1,100." And I'm just like, "Shh, like you cannot say that to me. Like like do not encourage this, So, it's just fat, like and then that's just like she's a professional strongman. It's just in our nature, It's just in our nature
Yeah,
to
it
keep going,
is.
and who knows? I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm definitely gonna like drop some body weight and all of that. But yeah, I think for me, like I mentioned this on the Table Talk podcast I did with Dave Tate. For me, like the difference now is like I've enjoyed the journey. You know what I mean? Like I was always focused on the end goal. Like it was like I was focused on the numbers. And this time I was just focused on training. And like it's so different now. We've talked a lot off air about, our bodies and how they're different and auto regulation and how it's like you're not waiting on the muscles to recover, you're waiting on the CNS, the joints, no matter
Mhm.
what people say about CNS fatigue. Unless you lift heavy weights, you shut up because I don't care what the science says. Like there is like your body is run down, your body is run
Yeah,
down. I don't care what you say, and it's not muscular. It is nervous system, it is this, it is that. So yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like I actually like you said, I think what I was missing was like the actual enjoyability of the sport. right? And I think that's why I checked out for so long and wasn't involved and wasn't around the sport, was because like I missed that side of it, right? I was just an athlete competing like in a sport. Like I now love this sport. And it's like I see, see myself as that 60 year, like I judged no, I emceed a meet a couple weeks ago, and there was a 68-year-old lifted, and I just thought, man, that is so badass. And there
Mm-hmm.
was a 65-year-old, and I'm going, I hope I can still stand up when I'm 65, 68, but like I see, like, whereas before I never saw myself a part of the sport, I never saw, a part of this world. It was like I did the powerlifting seminars for CrossFit, which I loved, and then when that came to an end, it was like, okay, I guess I'll go and into the real world. And now it's like I want to be a part of the strength world. I'm heavily involved in strongman, heavily involved in powerlifting. I just love it. And it's like these are my people. And that was one of the things at the Arnold too. It's like, I'm seeing all these people I haven't seen in forever, having conversations with people I've never talked to before, but we've conversed online. I'm like, these are my people. Like these are the people I connect with. And there's people in this sport, people like yourself, who share the same, like, desire to learn about more than just lifting weights, learn about how the mind works, how it all comes together, and the depth of our conversations. Like, I think if people saw our text message, they'd be like, these two meatheads are talking about these, quantum physics and shit like that. So I just think that it's like, it's been a whole different thing. And I think like one of the things, you know, it's not that, if you're listening and you're like, man, I could never bench 1,000 or like whatever, like that's fine. Like, it's not about the number. And that was the difference this time. It wasn't about the number. It was just the goal I set, right? My previous best was 910. So I set 1,000. It's only a 90-pound improvement. And with these shirts, I looked at all the situations, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like if I came back on the deadlift with a kabuki bar, I would assume I can deadlift at least what I used to deadlift. It's not apples to apples, but numbers it is, numbers
Yeah.
on paper. And so that's kind of the difference. And it's like, it's interesting because for the first time after the meet, I didn't go, okay, like, yeah, I could do it. Because I truly believe, like, if showed up the same way I did for the Arnold, I probably do have an 11 in me, but I also have to think to myself, well, the world record is 1,400.
Yeah.
like yes, there's not a lot of people there. There's not a lot of people at 1,200. There's not a lot of people at 1,100. There's more at 1,100 than before, and it's an elite club. But like, what would it bring me? Like, what more does it give me? And the truth is like, I will, to beat Jimmy, I would probably need to be 400 pounds and push myself more than I ever pushed myself before.
Mm.
And, you know, I'm older, so my body would have to hold up. Is it doable? Possibly. Is it worth it to me? Like at this point, no. So, but it's like for the first time at the end of the meet, it wasn't a desire to go do more. And it kind of felt like I felt when I did the 12:05, and I knew that was my last full power meet. At when I, and it was time to leave Westside. Like it was that same feeling, but back then it was like, oh, I'm done, I'm out. Now it was like, oh, I'm done with this. I can focus on my lifters. I can focus on the competitions that I'm going to run. I can focus on judging and emceeing and being involved that way. And it's like, oh, I can give them. I don't need to chase this dragon anymore. If I want to, it's there. But like, let's drop to 275, maintain that for a year, and because like I have this ability to go up and down, but I don't seem to stay anywhere. So okay, drop to 275. Let's stay in the 275 class for a year. I'll probably compete there. I do have the goal. I do want to bench 600 raw. It's been, I never chased that before. I just like decided I want to be able to do that. Because currently, right now, I'm like one of two to squat 1,200, bench 1,000, deadlift over 8. Dave Hoff's the other guy. We won't mention that he did it in one meet, but so that just shows you the rarity of Dave and how good he really is. But like I'm only one or two guys to do that so far. So I would like to. I don't want to do. I'm never gonna full lift raw. I don't think my body can handle it. I think I'm gonna try to get some stem cells and stuff like that to see if I can get at least my back to where I can hold heavy weight on it. But I don't see myself chasing raw numbers, but 600 raw bench, I'm pretty close. I've done 580 in combo in the gym, bands and chains or something on the bar, down to 550 full range. My best at Westside, and again, we never trained raw, so it was a close grip 580 that I did there. So I'm close to the numbers I was at least. And I thought, you know what, maybe I could just get this 600, especially the band shirts have changed the way I train, in a sense that, like, with the Phenoms and the Rage X's that I was using before, it was very much triceps. It really wasn't a lot of chest, because the way you bench,
back and triceps,
low, and it's basically front delts and triceps. You pull it back and then you lock it. With these band shirts, you're coming down in your regular bench press position. So shoulders and chest and like all of that stuff plays such a bigger role that, like, I would say, like, my chest is stronger than it was back then, and it's one of those things where I'm starting to understand the argument from guys, it shouldn't be now because it's been 12 years or so since, I was at Westside, but the argument that Westside doesn't work for Raw, I'm starting to see why people think that, because if they imitated the way I was training, like, it's not going to carry over because we were so top end heavy, especially like you look at Circa Max and we got blue, green, purple band on there. And then we eventually had two blues and a green, for some of the work we were doing, and it's like 400 on the box, 1,200 at the top, and you got briefs on, you got all of that. So I'm like, oh, I can see why people said, like, they mean Westside doesn't work, not conjugate. They mean Westside doesn't work because the videos that they see is like, we didn't put out a lot of our raw training videos. We did, like, it's like when we did something crazy, we put it out. So, I'm like, oh, I get where this argument comes from, because the picture they saw is geared lifters utilizing the training methods to maximize our geared numbers. So, when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I get it. It doesn't make any sense, but I
do
get
you
it.
know I did Circa Max one time? I did it one time and went, this is dumb. Like, this is not for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I honestly, for me, I believe that I had such good squat training from Brent Mikesell. For those that don't know, he was the world record holder. Him and Steve Goggins went back and
Unbelievable
forth.
squatter.
He ended up with like 1141, and then he got like some equilibrium problem where he would collapse every time he traveled and stuff like that. But I believe he taught me such good technique that, because like he didn't let me get in the canvas until I'd mastered, like, I had a single ply Z suit. He was like, you're going to squat 600 in that, and then you can get your canvas, And so, like, I think that I just built such a solid foundation that, like, I didn't need to be in my gear. Like, I learned the geared squatting from Brent Mikesell, and then I learned shirted benching from Spasti and Burns from the Metal Militia crew. So I didn't really, like, I didn't have a problem touching in my shirt, because, like, I could touch, I think it was 315 with the same shirt I benched 800 in. You just learn to manipulate stuff. And that was the same. So, like, Circa Max for me, I just trusted Louis, briefs on, squat suit on, straps down, no knee wraps, boom. Yeah, you're going to do this at the meet. Okay, cool. And I would. And like, there was enough people who had done it that it worked. But, I think some of the things people see, like the chain squats that like Dave does, the reverse band squatting Laura does a lot with her lifters, especially her raw lifters. I think all of that comes from the fact that, like, for a lot of people, Circa Max doesn't give them the confidence to believe they can go into the meet, because, squatting 1,200 plus with band weight, it feels very different than squatting 12. Like, the bands are pulling you down. It destroys you.
You
It
cannot compare
destroys you.
bands to straight weight.
But
That's
at the
why I
same
didn't like
time,
Circa Max, because it was so hard on my central nervous system.
yeah.
I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to train very often at all if I do this.
Yeah.
This is
For
crazy.
you'd have to do it like 6 to 8 weeks out
Yeah.
to recover, right? Based on your recovery term. But I think the key is that's what any good lifter can do, is look at a program and say, okay, like, I understand the concept here. The concept of Circa Max is delayed transformation, right? 21 days out, peak, and then, deload, go to the meet and peak. And it's simply like, that was how Louis came up with the whole the reason he went into trying to find a system that would work was because when he did linear periodization, what he found was he was hitting bigger numbers in the gym than he was on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't make sense. You know, sometimes he'd hit a big number a week out. Sometimes it'd be 3 weeks out, and then he couldn't repeat it. And then he got talking to other people at meets, and they were having the same thing. He said, "Man, that, like, you know, the old saying, there has to be a better way." That was
Mm-hmm.
essentially the kickoff point for Louis' obsession with figuring this out, was because how can I lift more in the gym and then come to a competition and under a competition environment not lift more? It just didn't make sense. And so when you look at it, Circa Max, it's literally peaking, but with delayed transformation. And that's all you need to understand. Okay, so like we apply this to strongman, for example. We got a strongman competition. Okay, 21 days out, we're doing our heaviest stuff. The week later, we're dropping to 80%. The week of the competition, we're down to 50%. We go to competition and compete, you know? And it's like, you can do that with anything. It's like,
I would even question, are you really peaking or are you just coming in 100% recovered?
yeah, well, what you're doing is you're pushing
They're
yourself
kind
that
of the same
hard and
thing.
then
It's like
allowing
you're talking
yourself
about
to
apples and
recover, right?
oranges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're creating a stimulus that your body has to respond and recover from. And, you know, when you're pushing that hard, it can take 3 weeks to fully recover, like fully recover, not recover enough to do another workout. You and I have talked about this. There's being able to work out, and then there's like truly being fully recovered and feeling phenomenal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, they did different phases of Circa Max, and I was lucky enough to come into Westside when Louis had kind of figured it all out. Like, it's 21 days. That's it. You know, these guys, the guys before me, I remember reading a Circa Max from Mark Bartley, I think, on Elite, and it was like 5 weeks. Or maybe it was John Bott, but it was like a 5 week Circa Max. I was like, this looks terrible. And it was like the first week you're doing like doubles, and the second week you work up for doubles, and then you do a single, and then you come back down. It's like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. But the point is like, I think that the key to any good uh athlete is being able to look at a system and understand it from a conceptual standpoint, because then you can self-regulate without much difficulty, right? And that's kind of like, really, the best type of programming is just templated. Because if you know, if it says do a bent row for six sets of 8, right, or something like that, and you're like, man, my low back's hurting. If you understand that, like, it's a row movement to train your lats, you literally could go do any rowing movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, okay, I'm going to use a seated machine, take some pressure off my low back. We're going to row. I'm going to get the same effect. And it's
Yeah.
not going to hurt the workout. And that's what you need to be able to do. That's where a great coach can do that on the fly with their athletes as they're walking them through that. And then that's where, you know, if you're getting programming for someone, you need to understand that, like, what they've written down doesn't have to be black or white for you to succeed. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you need to do a movement that hits these muscles, this, and this. And if you can get that, you can get the most out of your program, you know, because on days where you're like, man, this is really messed up, you're like, okay, well, I'll just do this movement or that movement. And that's why I'm still a conjugate fan, because if I go in and my shoulder hurts, okay, I'll use a safety squat bar today. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
I don't have to I don't have to spend
Well,
an hour trying to fix the shoulder.
I think I like the way you kind of, if you can look at it and conceptually go, here's why we're doing this. It doesn't mean we have to do this exactly, but this is the plan to getting here. Now things can change in between there, but as long as you have that concept of what we need to do, and this was one of the problems I had with linear periodization. But at one point I was talking to Eddie Cohn, who's the man of linear periodization. And he's like, yeah, no, you don't, if it just because it says that doesn't mean you have to do it.
Yeah.
Like if you're sick, then don't go do it. And the next day, just go whatever it's supposed to be. And I'm like, huh, what? Because like I thought linear periodization, do this, do this, do this. And then when I learned conjugate, from the very beginning, I went, wait a minute, this is like an outline.
Yeah.
This isn't do this. This is like, hey, you have weak points. Here's a plan that you can bend and move to your weak points. And then when I started training and we kept having problems and I'd call Dave up, it was like, no, you don't have to do it this way. Like, what do you think you should change? And I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm getting it.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
like,
the other benefit of that is that training is never boring. Like, if you so one of the things, like, obviously, as I've been employing it with other people, you've got limitations, you've got different things like that. But so one of the things I realized was like, okay, like, you can use the same movement every week and just change. So we're going to do a 5 rep max, then we're going to do a 3 rep max, and we do a single. especially for a younger athlete or someone who doesn't have good mechanics with a lift, yes, we want to do that
Mhm.
core lift more often than we don't. And the way we do that is by changing the rep max, right? But also understand that, like, when we're doing fives and threes, we're not allowing them to go to a 5 rep, the worst technique we've ever seen. If they're at 90% and their back suddenly rounds on rep 4 and 5, well, we're shutting them down.
Yeah.
We may shut them down on rep 4 and say rack it. Because at the end of the day, it's like, and I can't remember. I just heard someone say this, but when I was at Westside, you were in a pissing contest with your training partners. So
Mhm.
you weren't only trying to max out, you're trying to beat your training partners, and you push yourself beyond the limits, right?
Yes.
Um, that's a rare environment. And I'm not sure if it's necessary for strength gains, right? It's necessary for mindset, it's necessary for the environment, but is it necessary for gaining strength? And based on what I've seen, with as many examples that we have of people training submaximally, repetition work, all of that kind of stuff, the answer.
So we had a little technical difficulty there, but we're back. So we were kind of talking about like running conjugate and how it's an outline, which is totally, I think that's the best way to look at it. And even it's funny because when I was lifting, we hardly ever went full raw, but I had benched over 600. I was having an issue with my squat, so like just in my briefs, I could squat 9. Put my belt on, I could do 1,000. Scott would go with his same wide ass raw stance. Every now and then we'd go heavy raw, and he'd squat 8.5. I'm like, so I don't know why people say conjugate doesn't work for
I
raw
mean, I
lift.
squatted before my 12, I squatted 850 raw. I done 900 for 3 and just briefs, like with the Cambridge bar. I got videos of Greg Panora benching, close grip on the smooth 580,
Yeah,
at
there was
242.
actually a bunch of benchers. Like Halbert was crazy raw. There's a bunch of guys. Like I don't know where people go, oh, you can't do raw.
I think what it
That's
is that they think that you're just gonna, like, oh, if you were that strong, you would just go do a raw meet. And the reality is, it's like, no, we're not. It takes time
yeah.
to get to go from one discipline to the other.
Oh, to
And
be the best at raw, you'd have to train raw.
exactly. And for
Like
what?
which is another point of like, well, look, these guys are hitting huge raw numbers, and it was like a whim to do raw that day.
So I mean, I understand now more than ever what Louis, because Louis always harped on us that we train too much in our gear. And I was like, we're only in our shirt once every 3 weeks. What are you talking about? And now that the band shirts don't support you in the same way, like they give you more rebound, but they don't support you the way they did before. You're very much exposed, especially the shoulders. Um, like he used to talk about how we weren't able to lower heavy weights raw, like and he would talk about how like our JM presses, like, he'd seen, 495 for a JM press, and I mean we did max effort JM press one day. I think the most anybody got was like 420 or something like that, 25, something like that. But
Which is
um
still crazy.
he would say all these things about how weak we were raw. And what I've come to realize now is, like, when we go back and we look at Kenny and we look at Dave and we look at those guys that trained um like 90s, early 2000s, like they were still only putting their gear on like before a meet. So like their strength levels, like raw, were a lot either similar to ours or higher. And so what Louis was getting at was, like, based on where our gear numbers were, like your raw numbers are not adding up, because I've seen Kenny do this raw. I've
Mhm.
seen George do this raw, and then here we are benching, more than them in the shirt, but like raw, we can't handle things that he'd seen them do. And so at the time, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, because I'm like, well, we're PRing. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we're taking names off the board. We're doing this, we're doing that. And because we specialized in top end strength, so to speak.
Yeah.
But now that I need more raw strength in that band shirt, at least for stability, like I'm doing a lot of the stuff he talked about, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like now I get what you're talking about, like lowering weights, doing these things. Like it's all, like I have more understanding of time under tension and like things like that. And it's like, oh, like you talked a lot about this stuff. We just ignored you, because it was
Right.
like our numbers were going up. So
Well, I think there's something like I look back over my career and I'm like, man, when I first got into powerlifting, I had such an awesome base. And the better and better I got, there was a point where I didn't have any injuries till like my first Arnold. I strained my back at the first Arnold, and I'm like, dude, something's wrong with my back. I don't know what. And Ethan's like, what do you mean? What's wrong with it? I go, I don't know. I've never hurt myself. Like, I have no idea. And I kind of attributed that to like, well, I started taking testosterone. Maybe it was the steroids. But now I look back and go, no, maybe I was getting the injuries because that was the point where it was like that kind of where you are now. I was getting older and I'm like, dude, I got to get these numbers, man. Like there's going to be a point where I'm old enough that I'm not going to be getting stronger anymore.
Yeah.
So I was focusing more and more on heavy lifting and I was doing more heavy shit, more in the gear, like just completely working top end. And I look back now and go, I should have probably maybe trained those heavy days a little less and did a lot more supplemental GPP stuff because I think I was getting out of shape.
Yeah.
And I think you still, it's kind of like I've heard stories of Dave, like where Dave can't do a one leg squat, but he could do 1,000 pound squat.
Oh yeah, I was the same
Like
way.
that's not good. That's not healthy. And that's probably why I was getting hurt and why shit was happening.
like Louis said to me like one time, he's like, AJ, you got hips of a 12-year-old girl. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I got this big arch in my back, huge booty. Like you might obviously I got what are you talking about? And I went and saw Mike Robinson and Bill Hartman over at iFast in Indianapolis and they ran me through the functional movement screen and things like that. I couldn't even stand erect. Like
Wow.
I could not lock my knees, my hips, and my shoulders out simultaneously. And I'd been getting red lighted for soft lockouts at meets, and I'd been getting really pissed. Well, I physically couldn't even lock it out. And so I think like one of the things I heard Vincent D'Annunzio talking about recently on a table talk he did with Dave was he was talking about how like when you're young, like every training session you go in balls to the wall, and then when you're older, it's basically like every training session is to get you ready for that one training session a month that you can go balls to the wall. And that was the same with Louis. Like Louis, when he was healthy, he would train with us. It was phenomenal. Like I got so much footage of Louis training, more than I remembered. But there was so many times where like he didn't train for weeks, or like he would train but not with us, right? He would be in the gym, he'd be doing his reverse hypers, glute hams, abs, he'd be doing his battling ropes for 20 minutes, which he ended up using chains because he was so good at that. He would just do battling ropes with chains for like 20 minutes. Like the dude was like a machine, but he wouldn't lift with us. And I come to realize now is because he was just trying to get ready for the day he could lift with us. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like crazy to think that someone in their 60s was competing with people in their 20s and keeping up. That's
But he
the
was doing
madness.
all that base stuff to
Yeah.
keep that base
And so he
strength.
was building his base in between. And I think one of the things I think I've talked about it with you, but like sometimes I'm thinking like, is it that I'm this out of like, am I that out of powerlifting shape, right? Where my body just can't handle the workload, or am I just old and like this is just the new reality? And so I am doing a lot more base building, a lot more things like that. And I think that to your point, the reason it's so important is if you are a beginner doing conjugate, you don't need to not do conjugate to build a base. You just need to understand that like you need to drag sleds, like you need to do repetition work, like you need to treat accessories differently than you would if you were a top powerlifter, right? Like you're not just targeting a weakness. No, okay, like how do we get more bang for the buck here? So we're not going to do a very specific lat exercise. No, you're going to do pull-ups, right? You're going to get good at
Mhm.
pull-ups. And if you're not good at pull-ups, we're going to use assistance and stuff like that. And so I think that these are the things that like are very important. And I think it doesn't matter what program you do, you need to have that philosophy. And I remember seeing like Brian Siders, Brian Siders was a super heavyweight lifter, competed in IPF, so drug tested. I look at the volume he was doing. I was like, this is insane. But when you look at how long he'd been lifting, the style of lifting he was doing, raw lift, it wasn't raw, single ply, IPF. It's like, well, of course he'd have this much volume, right? It's base building. It's like, and it's different, and it's interesting because I hear a lot of people say like, how come powerlifters don't look like lift weights anymore? But I'm like, well, what powerlifters are you looking at? Because there is
Yeah.
powerlifters that look just like bodybuilders
There's a
still,
lot of them.
right? And
Yeah.
then there's powerlifters who don't. And when I look at the difference, and we've had a decade plus now of raw and gear lifting. When I look at the difference, right, and it comes down to like in your training, like specificity and things like that, raw lifters at like say 275 look a lot better than geared lifters at 275.
Hmm.
right? And that all it comes down to though is the way they're training and the things they're doing. And if you're putting your shirt, like a lot of geared lifters are in their gear every single week, well, of course you're going to look a certain way because you're never really training like for like you're not building a base, you're not building muscle. And I think that that's something that's super interesting. Like Louis was really good, like looking at someone and being like, oh, you need to be this weight class. And powerlifting now, and I get for a lot of people, it's still a hobby. It's fun. Like it's not something they're willing to give their life to. And that's completely okay. But like the amount of times I've seen lifters, I've been in now for a couple of years and I've seen lifters multiple times competing in competition as a judge. And, they need to gain probably 50, 60 pounds to optimize their structure.
Hmm.
And they don't, right? They just don't do it. And so it's different in that sense that it's like a lot of people, they're limiting themselves because of whatever reason, right? They probably have a good reason for staying at that weight or whatever. But like back when powerlifting didn't have social media, so to speak, like people just cared about being stronger. And so the whole looking good and all of that, like that's all new in powerlifting. But when you go back in the 80s and you look at and like thankfully they've started posting all of those like, nationals from the early 80s and stuff on YouTube. It's phenomenal to watch. But I mean, those guys look like bodybuilders. Well, when you go back, that's how they train. They train like
Yeah.
bodybuilders. It wasn't until powerlifting competitions and the world's strongest man competition came about that people started specializing in those sports. And when you look at Kaz versus Brian's um, or Thor or any of those guys in strongman, like they don't look like bodybuilders. Like they've optimized for their sport. And so
Yeah.
if you think of powerlifting and you think of it kind of like racing, right? Like your multiply lifter is like your drag racer. Like they're only
Hmm.
good for one thing. Your raw lifter is more like your off-road racer or something like that. So it's going to be different. It's going to look different. People are going to look different. But going back to your point, like base building is still so essential. And I think that for any program, if you don't have a lot of muscle mass on you, like you need to build muscle. That like you can optimize. The way I look at it is like you've got multiple things you can optimize like to get stronger, right? And
Hmm.
and and if you're a certain body weight and you don't have a lot of muscle mass, like you can get stronger at that body weight, but there's limit to it, right? And it's I'm a big guy, I'm biased. Like I always wondered why the 145er didn't go up to 165, 181 and like just but it's like those are the kind of things, the easy things to get stronger. It's just gain 10 pounds of muscle. And it might take
Yeah.
you 5 years if you're doing it the slow way. But it's like that's going to help you more than anything. And that's going to come from thinking differently about your training, your accessories, and your things like that. And spending time in the gym. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what socks you got on.
I think there's more crossover than we think though, between like a geared lifter and a raw lifter. And like I think there's more crossover. I bet because I have a couple arena football players and I have athletes and power lifters and I train a little bit of everybody. It's interesting to me. I was thinking about this the other day, how athletes look at training. Because I was talking to one of my athletes and he was like, dude, if you tell me to take 2 weeks off the gym, I'm like, cool. See you in 2 weeks, man. I tell a power lifter, hey, you need to back off a little bit. They're like, what the fuck? No way. I can go heavier. I can fucking do it. Like it's a
The week after the
totally,
meet
it's a totally different aspect where an athlete goes, listen, I'm a football player. I'm doing this
to get
to be
better
a
at my
better
sport.
football player. And I go, why don't power lifters go, I want to kick ass at that meet. I'm only in the gym because I want to kick ass at the meet. But instead, the gym becomes like that's more what they want to do than the meet, which is fine too. If you tell me, hey, listen, I like going and beating the crap out of myself every single day, I will give you programs that will kick your fucking ass every day. That's
But
what you want.
I think that's why, and it's difficult to understand, but I think that's why we do see so many people without a training crew or without training partners because they aren't competing for the reasons that we were competing for, right? Like to them, this is like a part of their life. It's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And they compete just to for personal reasons. They want to see progress, they want to push themselves. Um, but it is more about being in the gym. And it's really more of a holistic, healthy relationship with weightlifting, right? Like they're not in there killing themselves. Like, they don't, if they do the main movement and they run out of time, they go home and they don't think about the accessories. They don't try to make them up later or come in the
Mm-hmm.
next day. And I think it's very difficult to understand. But I think that, to your point, with the carryover, I would I would guess that if you took the top raw lifters and put them in gear, they would do better quicker than if you took the top gear lifters and made them raw right now. But barring a few, there is some real strong guys out there. Um, and I think what you'll find is, depending on how someone trains, if they train in their gear all the time, they're going to have a really hard time to take it off. If
Mm-hmm.
they still train like raw, even if they're doing linear periodization, it's the majority of their training is raw, and then they put the gear on as they get closer to the meet and things like that. They're going to be good. Same as like if someone has a big raw deadlift, they're probably strong. Like you can't
Yeah.
take that away, right? So depending on like the way someone trains, I think like, and the reason I say I think the raw guys would have an easier time crossing over a little bit, um, is because I think they wouldn't like, for a lot of them, they have this amazing base, and all they have to do is figure out the gear.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're
Which,
going to be
quite
limited.
honestly, if you have good technique, you're going to go into gear fairly easily.
Yeah, and for some of them to maximize the gear, there's a lot they're going to have to learn. If they're
Mm-hmm.
not using a band shirt, if they're using a multiply shirt, there's a lot they got to learn, right? So that learning curve may be a little bigger than I'm imagining. But if you've been in your gear all the time, if you're in your gear every single week, and all of a sudden you're taking it off, I think it takes you a lot longer to build the bottom end strength,
Mm-hmm.
because the if you give anyone a slinger, right? Let's give them a slingshot. They usually bench more immediately. They don't have to learn
Yes.
anything, right?
Yes.
So when you look at it like that, versus like, if you use a slingshot every week and then you take it off, well, all of a sudden your chest has to generate that force. So it'd be interesting to see. And that's honestly, it's why I love to see when Scott Medicine had that raw record and the shirted record. I loved it. I love seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love seeing when Brandon Lilly was doing raw and Greg was doing raw and Matt Wenham was doing raw. Like I love it because it's like it's proof that like the best of the best. And I believe the best of the best regardless. Like if
The best will
any
be the
multiply lifter
best.
decided to go raw and they were a top 10 lifter, they would probably be a top 10 lifter
Yeah.
raw after a year or two. So, like, I'm not taking anything away from their strength levels. I think they would. I think, unfortunately, and I've said this before, I think, unfortunately, um, the sport the way it is, when I grew up with it, I was looking up to guys like you, right? I had Brent as a mentor. I looked up to Brent. Guys like you were competing. Matt Smith was competing. Gary Frank, Andy Bolton, like all these mass monsters. And gear was all I saw. So like I wanted to be a mass monster. I wanted to lift as much weight as possible. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
bleed from my face because I thought that was the coolest thing ever when I see people do that. And that was what I saw. That's all I saw. And that's all I studied. And I was obsessed. So I was watching, you know, Brent squat over and over. I was watching you squat because you all look the same. So it's like, okay, like these people all look the same. Donnie looks the same. Like this is how you squat. Um, Now the majority of popular lifters are raw lifters. Um, and so people coming up, they're not like there isn't a lot of mass monsters in gear anymore, right? There's a few and they're great lifters, but
Mm-hmm.
not the way they used to be. There's not the competition the way they used to be, the way the Arnold Classic used to be. And it was like the event of the year and powerlifters, everybody wanted to go to that. We don't really have like it's still an amazing event, but it doesn't have the money that it had before. So not all the lifters are there, right?
Well, like even this year, I was trying to keep up with because I didn't go to the Arnold this year. I was trying to keep up, and I'm like, dude, what are there's like 4 or 5 different powerlifting competitions at this one thing now.
And when USAPL was there too, and they had a massive setup,
Yeah.
and XBC was their massive setup. Then XBC had events on the main stage, which was on the Rogue stage, which is bigger than the main stage. It's confusing, but there's so much you can see now, and it's difficult to draw comparisons to other sports because it's never apples to apples. But boxing is a really good example of the way powerlifting is, right? The best boxers in the world don't necessarily get the most attention. right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this entertainment value. And my training partner sends me one of my training partners, he sends me these funny videos all the time. But it's like, it's like guys in the gym doing goofy stuff. Um, and I'll look and they have like 500,000 likes on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the hell? And it's like, I, first of all, I never even think of anything like that to do in the gym. But second of all, like I'm not standing on a skateboard or, you know, doing some weird movement on a Bosu bull. Um, so like I'm not going to do that, but like that's what's getting the attention.
Without
And
a doubt.
so, coming up, I didn't even think there was a career in this sport, because I knew what strength coaches made. And I was like, that's like, who can live on that? Right. Online wasn't really a thing. And that's how I got into information marketing and like ebooks and stuff like that, because I was like, oh, I could actually make some money selling the information that I have. We got lucky with CrossFit and the seminars because I was doing seminars before CrossFit and we weren't selling anything out, and I
Mm-hmm.
got to travel the world and go to Australia and Italy and all these different places teaching the West Side methods. It was amazing. But then when that ended, it was like, okay, like, that's kind of, you get to do one or two seminars a year, but there was nothing really there. Now these kids look at it and it's like, there's so many ways to make money, right? And it's up to them how they do it. But like one of the easiest things, and you look at like Larry Wheels, he's a phenomenal athlete, but his popularity has come from crossover collaborations, doing different sports and things like that. He's an athlete, but he's no longer the best at anything. He was
Mm-hmm.
at one point one of the best powerlifters, but he's not because his focus is diverted. But he's made a phenomenal career for himself. So my point to that is when you're coming up and you're trying to figure this out, if you love this sport, depending on who you're following and what you jive with, like it's gonna pull you in the directions of the things you're gonna do. And so we see a lot more of that now with athletes who are like powerlifting is one of the things they do, but they also do strongman competitions. They also do this, they also do that. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But I think the reason geared lifting has struggled, any, multiply bands, even single ply lifting has been affected, and struggled. It's survived because of the USAPL, the IPF, and all of that. But the USAPL meet I was watching, I didn't see any gear. It was all raw. I don't know if it was a raw meet, but that's all the lifters were
Mm-hmm.
raw. Um, so my point is that when you're examples of that, like that's what you're probably going to end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you've got guys like Dan Bell who have been doing this for 10 years. So you've got people who have followed him for 10 years who are now older. And so unless those guys start putting the gear coming our way, right? Because we always had to go take the gear off. Unless they start coming our way, it's going to be difficult to get that. And I think we're going to see people. And the reason I say that is because there's raw bare knees. I haven't seen anybody do that in a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's knee sleeves that give you over 100 pounds. I mean, you can put weights on these things; they stand up by
Those
themselves.
the knee sleeves are crazy.
And the knee
Absolutely.
wraps, the knee wraps are better than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know what it's like, you get a good knee wrap, that
It's
cast on there.
I
It's
will I
phenomenal.
say this all the time. I go, stop telling me you're wearing this gear to protect you. You can
Oh,
lift with nothing. I've seen guys squat 700-800 pounds with no belt, no wraps, nothing. You can do it. It's not helping you.
I
You're
sing gear lift.
doing
Remember
it
Jeremy Frey?
because you
Jeremy Frey
lift
used to live
more.
bare knees with gear on. So it's not
Mhm.
like you have to wear knee wraps.
I
He was
I would
squatting a
not
thousand pounds.
I would not put knee wraps on until I was over 1,000 pounds because I don't like knee wraps.
So my point is, it's just those are the examples, and so unfortunately, and this like there is phenomenal multiply lifters. There's phenomenal band lifters. Like
Mhm.
I'm not saying there's not good lifters, but if we just look at the raw data and we look at the amount of people who we use deadlift as an example, the amount of people who deadlift over 900 raw versus in gear now, it's wild because you could say, oh, well, like 900 is a phenomenal number. Well, it is, except for like now we see it commonly in strongman. So
Mhm.
900 is the new 800 in powerlifting, in my opinion, for deadlift, especially with the kabuki bar, right? Um, and so when you look at it like that, you go, oh, the talent pool, we've got less, we still have some phenomenal talent. And I want to be careful because I've been misunderstood before as if I'm bashing geared lifting. I will always be a geared lifting fan, right? I
Mhm.
became the
Mhm.
APO state chair because I believe in the WPO, and I want to see that come back to the glory, and all of that. But from a data standpoint, like we don't have the number of people at the strength levels we had before.
Right.
And I would, I think it's just we don't have the amount of people coming in, because
Mhm.
there's still great crews out there. There's still big totals that are put up,
I,
but it's just not at the level that it was before in the volume, in the sheer volume of top competitors, right?
when I started lifting, I wanted to lift with the best of the best. Those were geared lifters. I can't say for sure, but if I started today, I would probably be a raw lifter.
Yeah, yeah, because that's where the biggest meets are right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the most money is. That's where the most attention is. Like I can tell you now, when I do a single rep, like I get some attention. When I do reps, I get more attention. When I do reps raw, I get even more attention. When I say attention, I'm
That's
talking about
interesting. That's so
I'm talking
interesting.
about views and engagement. Now, when I deadlift, and I very rarely have, I think I've posted like 2 deadlifts. Those videos do even like especially for reps. And so when you look at it and you look at what people are entertained by, interested by, like it shapes the way people do things, right? And so if you are someone who's trying to, like, you're a personal trainer and you're trying to get more clients, you're trying to build a business, you're trying to do all this stuff, these are like, you can't ignore these facts, and
Mm-hmm.
the truth is that, you know, I haven't said my meat's geared meat. My meat is for everybody. I'm focusing on the geared lifters, making sure I got the monoliths, making sure I got squat bars, making sure I got everything for the geared lifters. And last I looked was about a week ago. I got to look at updated lists, but the majority of people, I only had one raw registered out of a dozen people, so I was very pumped on that, right? But the meets I go to, they all allow geared lifters to lift. And I've seen a couple of people in bench shirts. I have yet to see anybody do full power out here on the West Coast at any of the meets I've been involved with.
Yeah,
And
it's
every
it's
federation I've helped with
pretty
allows you to
faded.
wear all the gear you want.
Mm-hmm.
That they actually, the WRPF, which is raw, their name is raw, world, they allow the band shirt, so you can go compete in these things. They're just people. There's just not a lot of people, trying to build a crew and get geared lifters together. There's not a lot of people within driving distance who can be consistent, and so it's just super interesting because I think it's one of those things, and I'm okay with it being a fringe sport. It's not about trying to turn it into something it isn't, but like, I think there's a lot of freaks out there that are missing out, and that are putting up massive numbers that I would just love to see them put up some crazy numbers. And I
Oh,
just want to
I
see what the
think
human
about
body is capable of.
like if you put Dan Bell in gear, like what would he do? Holy,
Yeah.
he's
I
so
mean,
big and he's so strong.
yeah. And that's the thing. And it's like Julius Maddox. Could you imagine what he could do in a shirt? Like,
Just to see him throw on a band shirt would be
yeah.
crazy.
But I honestly think for those guys, either they're content doing what they're doing, or they generally just
Well,
look at geared lifting and go, I don't really understand. I don't want to do anything that's not
yeah, but
me.
it's no different than a guy like me who like people like, well, you need to go do a raw meet, get your 600 or do this. And I went, no, I don't care. I compete in the WPO. I don't give a
Exactly.
shit
We
about
have
doing
that feeling, right? We have that feeling the other way. We're like, I'm not gonna. So, maybe they feel the same, but like I have legitimately said, like when someone said, like, why didn't you ever try to bench 800 at Westside? And I'm like, well, I heard a story, Matt Wennon and George Halbert meeting up to challenge each other for a 600-pound bench, and George tore his pec. I said, I don't want to tear my pec. And that was like my whole justification was that, like, two guys that were former West Side guys. I think George was still training in there on Sundays. I never saw George because he was, I think, super early, like 4:30 on Sundays. But two guys that were West Side lifters that trained conjugate that basically went to do a 600 bench. One of them got hurt. I'm like, well, I don't want to be a guy who gets hurt. So it was like, it was never important enough. It was like,
I agreed to do one meet my friend was putting on, and I'm like, well, I'll bench raw at it. Didn't really train raw at it or nothing. Didn't really train much for it, but I'm like, I'm going to go hit 556, something like that. I went in and hit 500 on 550. I tore the piss out of my pack.
Yeah.
And to this day, my partner's like, "Oh, really smart doing that raw meat, huh?" I
But
bet
I
that
feel
with the
like the raw
torque you had
guys
your
probably
shirt
feel
on.
like that. They're like, well, I'm not going to put that gear on and lift something 200 pounds more than what if I get hurt? Like I'm sure there's that level, or they just think it's ridiculous, which is a fact. They can think that, but my
Yeah,
experience,
but
I've,
you know
I've
what's
talked to,
funny is like back in the day when the raw lifters were like, you lift more with that. And then I look at the raw lifters' knee sleeves and shit now and go, but you lift a shit ton more with those. What's the difference between the suit and those wraps? Or
see,
I've
my
seen
thing is
guys
this.
wearing thicker singlets, really, really tight that technically aren't gear, but I'm like, that's not a regular singlet.
See, my opinion is this, and I talked to Anthony Oliveira at the Arnold about it because right now the APO doesn't allow band shirts, right? And I said to him, well, this it doesn't make sense to me because we allow everything else, so we'll take money from everybody, and we're lifter like we want to include everybody. We don't want to, exclude anybody, but we won't allow the band shirt. Like, explain it to me. And he said it best. He said, and it just happened this weekend where someone competed, broke a multiplied total, but they were in a band shirt, and it was registered as a multiplied total, not as a band total, because it's just not the federation is not separating multiply and unlimited, you know.
Hmm.
And so, in my opinion, if all the records are kept separate, right, which you've got raw, classic raw with knee sleeves, and then raw with wraps, right? If all the records are kept separate, there's not a problem. But I don't have a problem. I love watching all of the lifting, right?
Mhm.
I think the problem comes in, right now with multiply, where it's like some federations are saying band shirts are part of multiply versus being unlimited and having it separated. And there needs to be that separation for the integrity of the sport, because a total with a band shirt versus a total with a poly shirt, it's two totally
The
different
big
animals,
difference,
right?
yeah.
Totally different animals. And so I really like the separation, but there has to be enforced. But to say that you are a bigger cheater than me, therefore your lifts are null and void, this is the argument I will never understand. Because if you only want to lift with a belt, go ahead. The belt has no rebound properties. Now, a belt does add strength. All the research that there's scientific papers on it where
I
the belt
get
adds
100
strength.
pounds out of my belt at least.
So we could get into that, but the belt has no rebound effect. So let's just say a belt is okay because it's a supportive device for safety, not for actually rebound. The minute we add anything that gives us rebound, like a wrist wrap doesn't rebound, it just locks your wrist in place. But if
Canvas
we wear
suit
elbow
doesn't,
sleeves, it helps,
a
right?
canvas suit doesn't stretch, so it doesn't give you rebound technically.
Well, you're in the minute, but you get the concept I'm saying here, right?
Yeah.
So like my point is like, okay, you wear knee wraps or knee sleeves and you get let's say we just say a blanket 100, right?
Hmm.
I think that's a safe number. Then you put a single ply suit on and it gives you another 50 to 100 depending on the suit.
Hmm.
Then you get a multiply suit. Now you're getting, let's say, 300. So you've got 100, 200, 300. Then you get a band shirt and that's the 400 pounds over your roll. That's cheating. But like the single ply isn't, or is the single ply cheat? Like, at what point do you say it's too much, right? And that's
Well,
kind of always been my argument is like, hey, in racing we have 50cc, we have 250cc, like unlimited, like just respect it. It's like none of those people look at it and be like, oh, it's
I've
the same thing.
I've never
Like,
heard a pro stock guy go, look at that motor, he's cheating.
exactly. So
He's
when
in
I
his
look at it,
class.
I
He's
go,
within the rules of his class.
yeah, there's
Like the
different.
125 and
Yeah.
250cc in dirt bikes, which is now because it's four stroke, it's whatever, 450 or whatever. But like
Yep.
I don't
And
I
it's
don't hear
kept
those guys
separate.
bitching about it.
It's kept separate because here's what I do know. When I go to meets, and I go to all sorts of meets, I've gone to tested meets, non-tested meets. I've been involved in all. So you got all these different people competing all these different ways. But you know what? The camaraderie, the support for each other, the cheering each other on, the vibe of the meet, like the energy,
Hmm.
that is a shared experience that we all, regardless of what we're wearing, go through. Like that's what powerlifting is. And so in essence, it's like if we can keep that as the sport, like it shouldn't matter how someone lifts. And I've seen it more now, like you've got people who have the gyms have top raw people, top geared lifters, and they're all
Yeah.
coexisting and they're all helping each other and pushing each other. That's the way this should be. It's
Well,
not. It's not us versus them.
I
It's
think
us
it's
versus the rest of the fucking world.
yeah. I think it's like when I see okay, I was squatting around 1,200. I'd see somebody squat 9 or 1,000. I'm like, oh, that's huge, dude. I go, when you're in the hole, you're supporting yourself.
Oh yeah.
I go, the deeper I get in the hole, the more support I get. I go, that's fucking crazy, man. And then the people that I knew that lifted raw that had been in gear, like, dude, you just bench that much. That shirt tears you up. That shirt fucking crushes you. Like, that's crazy. Like, I don't understand why we can't just have appreciation for the different styles.
Well, I think, and again, like I'm probably wrong in most of what I say, right? Like it's something I've come to realize it's right to me right now, but like someone can say something like, "Oh, you know what? I never thought of it like that." So my views are just my views. They're not facts, but like for whatever reason, humanity seems to, and we see it in religion. I'm going to use religion as the because it is an example. You got all these people that believe in God, but they're a different denomination or different religion.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow the world gets them to fight with each other. And that's how our sport is. We're
Well,
a niche
what's
sport.
amazing too
We all
is
love lifting heavy weights. We do it in different ways, but instead of trying to be one, we just fight with each other and
mhm,
or not necessarily fight with each other. I think there's less fighting, but we look down upon each other. We trash talk the other side of it. We don't
yeah.
want to be involved, and it's like I've come to a place where like no, like I love this sport. I want to be involved in all of it at all levels and help
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And I don't care how you lift. If you had like a winner is a winner, and I think that I've had conversations with many of the top raw guys because I learned stuff from them
Mm-hmm.
because I figure if I get my raw bench up, my shirt bench will go up.
That goes
So I
back to
want to
my
learn.
crossover
I want to
theory.
find out,
Like, why
and
can't
so
we can still learn from each other? I mean, part of the reason I
exactly.
think raw numbers are so huge right now is some of the stuff that we learned during those years of being in gear.
Yeah. Well, and also I would argue that when you have a large group of people pursuing the same thing, that the needle moves a lot faster than when you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we competed, we had a large number of people pushing multiply boundaries, and records fell at a staggering pace.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was at one of the pro-ams one year. The pro-am Donnie Thompson totaled 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Donnie didn't even get top 5 when it came to the formula. First man to total 3,000 didn't even make top 5. Dave Hoff won that event and gave Donnie cash that he won because he felt like Donnie deserved something, because he just broke the all-time record. But the
Yeah.
3,000 back, like that, I think there was like 9 all-time total world records broke at that meet. It was insane, right? And then not to mention the world records for the individual lifts that were broke. It was
Well,
insane. That's what it was like. Well, fast forward today, we don't see that a lot of multiply. We see it a lot in raw. But again, it's the volume of lifters focused on the pursuit of the numbers. We hadn't seen a raw record get broken in 20 years until Stan Efferdin stepped up to the table, like
well,
total record.
I think that's the same thing. I bring up Brent Mikesell a lot because I think first of all, the guy who leads the way, there is a more of an I don't want to say more impressive, but there's an impressive thing about the guy who keeps going, I don't give a shit if anyone's done it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And like I came in that time when Brent broke, I think he first broke it with like 1,052 or something. And then it was like 1,070, and then it was like 1,090, and then all of a sudden Goggins comes out and beats him
Did
to
11.
11.
And yeah, and he
And
was so
then
mad about that.
yeah, and then he went to 40, and I think he eventually got like 1,070, and then I think I got him with 1,173. But it was just like bam, 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 and that person that breaks that record, it's so funny how that record can last. Like Ryan Krauser just beat Randy Barnes' record. Then within a year, 2 other guys broke Randy Barnes' record.
Hey,
It's like once that person steps up, everybody's like, "Oh, well, I can do that. Well, that record can be built."
and I
Broke.
honestly believe so. And again, this is where it's hard to not think the women's side of the sport is more impressive than the men's right now.
Right now, I do think the women's is more impressive.
when you have a woman, you know, in strongman, but she deadlifted 700, and then fast forward to this year's Arnold, and all of a sudden, all of these women are over 600.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, there was only one woman to ever deadlift more than 600 pounds, Becca Swanson. And now I'm sitting there watching the USAPL meet at the Arnold, right? And it's not a heavyweight class. I don't know what weight class it is. I came in, I'm just watching. But these girls, I'm going to say they're 165, 181 is maximum. And that's just me based on the weights they're lifting. But they weren't big girls. And they're opening up with like 520.
Mm-hmm.
This is raw, drug tested, and they're opening up with over 500. And it wasn't just one, it was like the whole class. And I'm sitting there going, when did it become normal for like females to deadlift 500? And then the strongman competition happened later that day. All these girls are pulling over 600,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then
like
that girl from New Zealand benches 700 and
mm-hmm.
looks like she could bench 800 any day now, you know.
But like you said, if you look at all the powerlifting, what is the group that's growing the fastest right now? I think it's the females.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's more people coming in. There's more people pushing each other.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. It's getting to the point where like male versus female, it's pretty even in this sport. And it's cool. It's really cool to see. I just like my thing is like I just want to see the men step up and start smashing records again. And the thing is like you mentioned it earlier, the reason Jimmy impresses me so much is because he is so far ahead. And yet he is driven to bench 1,500 pounds. There is not one reason he needs to do that.
Jimmy
right?
is lifting.
He has that goal and he's chasing it. And there is nobody in his way. Same with Hoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like people go, oh, you know, like, why does he do this? Why does he do that? Well, first of all, there is nobody within 200 pounds of him who's competing. So the fact he keeps putting up these totals is mind blowing, but it kind of falls to the wayside because he's so far ahead. And it's like, I just want to see, like, for my own selfish reasons, like, I want to see that level of competition again come back because it was so fun, so exciting.
Yeah.
And what would even watching it, like when I was watching before I was strong enough to lift against you guys, like it was watching it was the most entertaining thing ever. And that's why I got back involved with the WPO, because I'm like, if we could bring this back at a level, it's going to take unity and it's going to take a place that we can do this. And, you know, being that they were the Olympia and those kind of things, that makes sense. But it's like we have to support one another. And it's not that we need people to come over. It's not that we need to like recruit raw lifters. No, we need to make our thing the best we can make it and not worry about those guys, you know, like let them do this, let them do that. But like, how do we bring unity? And it's like, you know, we can't afford division when you've only got 2,000 multiply lifters in the whole world. You know, it's like, we can't afford to have 16
I remember
federations.
Watching Andy Bolton and Frank going after the deadlift record and flip-flopping. Then Donnie took the full meet WPO world record. Then I took it. And then like 3 months later, I'm like, son of a bitch, he just took it from me. And then so I go take it back from him. And then he took it from me. And like, that was fun. That was fun. You were excited to see every meet. You were excited to actually follow what people were doing. Because you're just like, God, it's crazy. This is just crazy. And like the numbers keep going up and keep going up. And I think it created a great atmosphere for fans too.
Yeah. I know right now I'm so excited. There's that raw meet coming up. I think it's in September. I don't even know who's putting it on, but like Dan's doing it. And I think that Jesus is doing it. I think the 308 world record holder, raw world record holder is doing it. I think most of it, but there's no dots. It's biggest total wins. And I'm so excited because I respect everybody and I've seen phenomenal things from all different weight classes, but I will always think the biggest weight on the bar is the most impressive. I remember when Jeff Lewis lifted. Jeff Lewis was they couldn't weigh him in, right? Let's just say that. So he was at least 500 because he couldn't weigh in on a scale.
No, he was,
dude was
550
gigantic.
Plus.
But he was also like 6'6", so he was just like the biggest human.
Yeah, he was 6'5" or 6'6".
I remember he held his belt up one time, but it was bigger than me. Right? Let's just like so.
I was 380, and I love Jeff because he's so nice.
Oh, it
So
was just, yeah.
I would see Jeff in the hotel and I would go running up to him and just like slam into him. And you're like, yeah, he has some fat on him, but dude, he didn't move.
No.
Like, and I'm
And my,
380 and he didn't move.
and my thing was, I didn't care if he weighed 600 pounds. And so he was only benching twice
Mhm.
squatting twice his body weight. I wanted to see him lift the craziest weights.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest thing ever. And I
Hmm.
think that, everybody loves this sport for different reasons. But I think for me, it's like seeing people push the limitations of the human body. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see that. And I want to see it at all levels. But for me, I'm most impressed when that weight on the bar is numbers that you've never seen before.
Hmm.
When I think
Hmm.
about Jimmy having the nuts to get under 1400,
Oh, I mean,
when no other
did you
human
know the
is
first
at
bench
13.
that he had to switch benches during that because the bench was
Yeah.
bending?
Yeah.
Like,
But see, and these are the things we
it's
don't think
just
about, right?
freaking crazy. It's
These are the
just
things we don't think
crazy.
about. And that's why the equipment advances. But the truth is too that I've seen, if you have Jimmy's Patreon, he'll post a lot of his videos. I have no doubt that he could bench 700 raw. If not close to that. Like, I've
Well,
seen
I
the
mean,
numbers I've
even
seen him
just,
do in training
yeah,
is that, and
some of the
he'll
raw
put on one of
numbers
those little half slingers
that
that
he
like give
hits
you
for
like 50
huge reps.
pounds. And he's
Yeah.
like 800 for reps in it. It's like,
Yeah, like every video I see of him, my jaw just drops. And I'm like, how? Like, how?
but see, like Tyler Butcher's
People
another
can't
guy,
bench 1,000 pounds. He can rep it out.
yeah. Tyler
It's
Butcher's another guy.
crazy.
He's single ply lifter, put on a band shirt, did the 1,000. He won the Arnold Anderson invite because he got 3 lifts.
Hmm.
But like, you just look at it and you go, man, like these guys are just monsters. And it's just, to me, that's the funnest stuff to watch.
Yeah.
Like same on the women's side, like the girl benching 800, closing in on 800. I'm so excited for that, like, because I
Hmm.
just think it's phenomenal. Now, girls benching 600 at lighter weight classes is impressive and phenomenal too.
Hmm.
I just love the mass monsters. But my point
Yeah.
is, was the reason I mentioned that meet is that like even on the raw side over the last few years, I've seen division where they're not going like they don't all go head to head and things like that. And I think that that's kind of one of the things with the sport in general is that there's no incentive to go to nationals or worlds. Like
Yeah.
there's no incentive like to like even money meets. It's like certain money meets they won't go to because it's an on a dot score. So like I think what we're missing is like meets that people want to show up for regardless as a group.
Well,
Right. And
I think you got to give people a reason to go compete against each other.
yeah.
And even in the WPO, like I think part of the WPO's problem is when they first came out and had big prize money, people wanted to win.
Yeah.
Then they went to, oh, you get 1,000 for a record, and you're going to get a little bit if you win first place. So people weren't going to WPO worrying about winning. Were going to the WPO worrying about breaking records.
Mm.
And I think you need to have people. There needs to be some prestige to winning the meet.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like anything, right? Like as I say, I draw parallels to boxing because it's like what's the incentive to fight Jake Paul if you're a professional boxer? Well, there's not, except for you're going to make more money than you've made doing anything else. And so when you're in a sport that is limited and your time is only there, and it's like you see people making these things, but you know it, other like purists get upset and they get angry because it's like, oh, it's not real boxing, which is true. But when I look at it, like what Jake's doing is he's building his record just like any boxer does. But instead of fighting boxers who he's going to knock out, he's fighting other famous people that he knows he can knock out to build his record.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I think he does want to fight real boxers. I think he does want a real title. But it goes to show that the where the audience is, where the
But
money
even
is,
at
like,
that, what's the real title? Because there's multiple titles.
right. But for him, I think it's like he wants. I think there is an inner. I think is as much as he's a business genius, I think there's an inner desire for him to win a belt because his
Mm-hmm.
brother's in WWE. Why couldn't he do so? He's choosing to go into a real sport with real danger, right? Not that the WWE doesn't have danger, but it's it's self-inflicted, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if something happens, it's usually an accident. It's not a part of the daily, right?
Yeah.
And I think wrestlers would probably argue with that because I know how brutal it is on them. It's like, it's easy to say, oh, it's fake,
Oh, it's
therefore it's
hard.
not
Yeah, it's
hard.
hard.
So I'm not trying to say that, but what I'm getting at is like, why would you pick a real sport that you could get really hurt in, like when you don't need to? And I think it's because he just genuinely wants to, like he's trying to prove that he is a real athlete, right?
Yeah.
But when we look at it like that, the incentive to go for him to fight a real boxer is not really there. Just like the incentive for all these powerlifters to go to this meet or that meet isn't really there because, like you said, there's not a big prize or big enough reason to do it, and that's kind of like when you think of like the Mountaineer Cup, why did people go to that? Was because they paid for it to be on ESPN, right?
Hmm.
So it's like people were like, oh, I'm going to get exposure and it's going to be on TV. Like, so you might not have money, but like, is there exposure? And I think that those are the kind of things that like, I think we will see more of that. But for some reason, strength sports and even strongman, because this strongman sport's blown up. They had a stadium at the Arnold, 2,700 people inside the expo hall for the
Hmm.
strongman, right? You have to buy separate tickets to go into that, right?
Right.
But half of the field at least like work full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So there's this illusion that these guys are all like crushing it, but the reality is that they're a
Well,
guy
it's
like
it's it's
Thor,
it's a very
yes,
few,
but
it's a very few that are actually
yeah,
living the professional athlete
yeah.
lifestyle.
But when you look at the sport and you look at the amount of money like goes through supplement companies, you look at the amount of money through like big box gyms, and
Hmm.
like it's not like there's not money in the fitness industry. It's one of the it's
Well,
one of the core four industries in the entire universe, right? And so guys like Larry Wheels, who I mentioned earlier, they figured this out. They figured out that this industry is very lucrative, and they've figured a way to tap into that and to get paid for that. I hope, and Brent said this will never happen. It hasn't happened yet in the 20 years, so maybe it will never happen. But I hope that like at some way somebody comes along, or or enough money comes along where you can create this. But what I've seen is every now and again money comes along and it works for a little bit, but then as soon as the money's gone, it just crumbles and it's
mhm.
on to the next thing. And so unless we can create sustainability, unless we can create consistency, it's going to be very difficult to create any permanent change or control. Even from like an athlete standpoint with sponsorship, it's like you're sponsored, but it's not like you're getting any money, you know.
Well, okay, so this goes back to something, and I thought, gee, I'm not a union guy, but I thought, man, we need to unionize powerlifters because back in the day when I went to and got like Muscle Milk didn't come to me. I went to Cytosport and I put together a package and I did a presentation and I got sponsored. And I didn't want supplements. I'm like, no, I don't need supplements. I need money. And so I was making, I think, 12,000 a year. And then I go talk to all these other people, these other lifters. I'm the animal cages having me, and I'm like, what are they paying you? Well, they're giving me supplements on a gym bag. I'm like, why aren't they paying you? It's animal. They're huge. I think to some extent we sell ourselves short.
I think what it comes down to is that we don't. It's the best way to say this. I know I'm offending people left, right, and center today. Probably they listen back to me, this guy. But no, I think that the reason we do it is because like we all have something in us that we're trying to prove something, whether it's to ourselves, whether it's to someone else, whether it's to the
Mm-hmm.
bully or like we do this and push ourselves because we're constantly trying to prove something. And I think when we get these opportunities, we feel good that we're being recognized, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're being recognized, we're being seen. And these companies have never done it. They've always done as little as possible for the athlete. And they may have good reason.
Well,
The
the reason
relationship
is they
between
know if you don't want to do it, there's
someone
somebody
else
right
will.
behind you
And,
that will.
and I think that that's kind of a little bit where it's like, so I went to Monster Jam with my kids and I was like, this is not real. It's phenomenal, but there's no way. So I started doing some research in Monster Jam, trying to understand it. And it's real in this. It's like it's the same as the Nitro Circus. It's
Hmm.
real in the sense that they're going out there, they're racing against each other, they're performing their freestyle, they're doing their two-wheel tricks, they're doing all of that. And if they could do good, they could crash, they could do whatever. They're getting judged, they're getting scored. At the end of the night, there's a winner, but they're all paid a salary.
Hmm.
There's no prize for that night. There's no winning prize. There's no winning prize for the. Now I'm sure as a driver, you get to drive the more popular vehicles, the better you do. The grave digger, the ones that are recognizable. I don't know all the ins and outs, but basically what I realized was, and same with Nitro Circus, like, they go out every night, they perform tricks, they crown a winner at the end of the night, but they're all just paid a salary to be there. I've concluded that, like, that's the only real way you'll ever do it. If you can, like, if a company comes along and you're full time, like, you can be a full time lifter because of a company, like like, and you have the majority of good lifters, you can dictate where they lift, when they lift, who they lift against, because you are supporting them. So you get
Hmm.
the like, that's the trade off, right? Is the trade off is like, it's just like a collegiate athlete, when they sign for a full ride scholarship, like, they kind of sign all their rights away, because they're
Right.
basically saying, like, I'm going to take money from the school and get an education, and in return, I'm going to be an athlete. I'm going to represent this school. And so, rightly or wrongly, you know, they kind of don't have the ability to do whatever they want, right?
Right.
Like, that's a part of that. So I think, like, that's what will the only thing that would really create a big difference. But again, it takes a company to come along, that to be a part of their business model, to be able to sustain it over time. And, like, how many lifters can you sponsor fully? How many lifters can you get sharp? Um, Rogue does a phenomenal job with the strongman stuff. And, they've helped out a little bit in this, a little bit in that. But it's kind of like, it takes companies like that. And in my experience, talking to different companies, for sponsorship and stuff like that, they don't see the return on investment from putting up lots of money for competition. Like, they just, like, it's just lifters. They'll go buy the cheapest squat rack from, any company versus the company that sponsored the meet, because
Well, I'm going to
they don't have
burst
the
a bunch
money
of
to.
bubbles here.
Yeah.
You've studied the social media stuff a little bit. You talked about it earlier. Does the great lifter really get that many hits, or does the dude that looks really good that does dumbass shit in the gym get a shit ton of hits? And
Yeah.
you have to go. Like when I went to Cytosport, I said, "Here's what I can do for you." I had ads. I made up my own ads, and I go, "Here's what I can do for you." Like, I don't expect you to just give me money. I want to make your company more money so you can pay me.
Yeah. Well, that's the hard thing, right? And Donnie talks about this. It's like, if you just post your lifts, like, you don't build a big following, right?
Mm-mm.
And so, unfortunately, you can't just be the best and get super popular.
No, you can't. Not
And
not not in
so,
this sport.
no. And so, like, now you can get a lot of followers, but if you compare, let's compare Dan Bell with that, oh, I'm not gonna remember her name. What is it? There's this cosplay girl. She was at the Arnold line around the corner. Um, uh, Patty Beefcakes or something like that. Something like that. Anyway, uh, she has, I think, 6 million followers.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, I'm still trying to figure it out. And maybe someone could DM me and tell me if I'm wrong. But as far as I can tell, she's just someone who works out a lot and makes a lot of videos, like YouTube stuff and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. You know,
But
and
I
it's a
think
different. And so you have to be you do have to be willing to play the game. It's not like you couldn't play that game, but at some level, it's like you have to kind of decide. Are you going to turn on the camera every 2 seconds, like, and do that? Like, it's up to
yeah.
you how you play.
Oh, it's
But,
hard.
like, to your
I
point, it's like sponsors, and my friends own Fit Aid. It's a recovery drink. They have lots of different drinks, but anyway, Life Aid's the company, but Fit Aid is the beverage. But they CrossFit. They sponsored a lot of CrossFit athletes in the
mhm.
beginning, and they found that, like, the top athletes, like, in terms of ROI sales, when they would do a promo or something, like, hardly ever made sales. It was always the popular influencers. It was always
Mhm.
the people that had, like, true followers that, like, were enamored with their life and all of that. And so it's just a different game, and you have to choose what you play. But I think it's tough because when you're trying to build a support, like with powerlifting, like you get, if you get into the goofy just to get attention, you know, you're limiting what you like long term. You're limiting what you're going to do. You know, like, oh, let's create a format. Like, you know, let's get the strongest squatters. Let's build teams. You know, you can have one person to squat, one person to bench, one person to deadlift. Like, okay, cool. You'll get attention for it, but lifters aren't going to want to do that. Like, they're going to want you. You know, they'll do it if there's money, but it's not like, oh, sweet, now we're a team, we're going to do this all the time. So I think it's just one of those things where it is what it is. And you know, I sound like an old guy complaining right now, I think, about the sport, but I honestly think the sport's in a better place than it's ever been. It's just I wish that it was multiply that was as popular.
I think it'll come. I think it's still going to come around more at some point.
Oh, it's going to
But
keep growing.
I
It's
mean,
going to keep growing. I
it's
think
interesting to talk about all this stuff, because I'm like, well, what if a company decided to focus on powerlifters and help build those powerlifters profiles
oh
with the company together? Then they could create
yeah.
more popularity for those lifters, which creates more money for them, and kind of a whole, like, what could they do if it was done correctly?
I think what it comes down to though is like you have to be a content machine. Like your
Mm-hmm.
personal brand. The most important thing as an athlete, I think the most important thing you can do at all is build a personal brand if you are um going to be an athlete or a coach or something like
Yeah.
that. It's to build a personal brand. Obviously, if you just enjoy your job and you do this for fun, there's not necessarily a reason. But you know, build your personal brand. And then when you look at how you build a personal brand, it's about creating value. It's about creating value for
Mm-hmm.
others. And you know, those that post 3 times a day do better than those that post once a day, who do better than those that post once every other day or every few days, do better than those that post. So it's volume and it's consistency. And really it comes down to, building that audience. And so when these big companies have money, they're not looking at the talent of the person. They're looking at their ability to promote and
Mm-hmm.
the value they're going to bring, because you're essentially a salesperson for that. You're a representative. And so, you know, if you had a company that wanted to put all that time and effort in and actually, you know, build the brands for the individuals, I think it could work. And there is companies out there that are building brands for individuals, you know, who have teamed up with people doing it. The problem is that the word personal brand means personal brand. So it comes down to the individual. If they're not willing to get in front of the camera or
Mm-hmm.
so like, you know, for me, I know what I need to do, but like, I don't even think about it sometimes. Like, I'll finish my workout and be like, fuck, I didn't film anything. What am I going to put on social media today? I'm like, well, so you like, ideally, I'd have a video guy there who can just film it, but that comes at a cost, right? And so
Yes.
all of this, when you look at the popular YouTubers, Mr. Beast is a great example, but most of these popular YouTubers, like, they'll talk about they did this for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, every day making a vlog, like nobody there, and then one day it just hits. And so
See
for the
that?
majority of people, they're just never going to put in the work. They're never going to put in the work to build that brand or that audience. And so, you know, and I'm guilty of it because, you know, I never focused on building my own brand. I've always built companies and things like that. Now I'm building the brand, and I know how slow it is. I know how hard it is, you know, and why would a company want to sponsor me with 3,500 followers on Instagram versus someone who's got 1 million just because I'm stronger than them? You know, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the reality. That's the harsh reality. And it's like, you know, Donnie always says that nobody gives a damn about your squat. But it's like, in reality, nobody gives a damn about you unless
Donnie's
you
a little
matter to them.
cynical, though.
Yeah, it is, but it is true in a sense, right? Like, in the sense of, like, it gives you, like, that accolade gives you the ability to basically show that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you and I both know
Well, I mean,
there's
it's
many coaches out there without hardly any accolades that have done very good at building their business, because as soon as you have clients who get results, you don't need your own results. You can just leverage their results. And so
mm-hmm.
there's a lot of coaches out there who are great coaches. There's also a lot of bad coaches out there, but they themselves were never great at as an athlete, maybe like didn't even compete.
Mm-hmm. I think it's funny for me because coming into this, like I'm a person who has to have goals. I have to have things I'm working to. And the outcome of those goals is important to me. So right now it's like, okay, I'm not lifting, but I got a lot of knowledge. I want to build that knowledge. I want to reach people, but I also want to make a living. So, I mean, like if you look at my Instagram, I have almost 4,200 posts and 7,000 followers. Like if I keep going the way I'm going, I'm going to have more posts than I have followers. And, on my podcast, this is going to be like episode 53 or something. And that doesn't count my quotes episodes. Like how long I'm to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going, but how long does it take? I mean, I don't have a realistic goal of how long does this take? What else do I need to do? Like, how do I reach it? It's just my nature to keep going. I'll fucking figure it out. I'm going to keep working.
Well, and you will. And that's, I think, like, that's the difference. This is a lot of people could take something away from just this right here. The attitude of I'm going to figure it out is why you broke records.
Mm-hmm.
It's why I broke records, right? Because you make a commitment. And when you make a commitment to something, you say, no matter what, we're going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
No matter the ups, no matter I'm not going to quit. I'm going to figure this out. And success, typically, in my experience, what I've seen is literally comes to people who are just willing to gut it out longer than everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, the truth is, for some people, it doesn't take that long for whatever reason. They get lucky. They have a friend who's already popular that shares their shit. Like, they say something that's controversial and somehow it blows up. And I'll use my training partner, Shane, as an example. He loves traditional strongman stuff. And so he makes these videos. As you shared them, he makes these history strongman videos, the history of stone lifting, the history of this, the history of that. The dude didn't
Those
have an
cool.
Instagram account when I started training with him. And he routinely gets 3 million views on a video.
Wow.
Right. But how do we leverage that into income? Those are conversations we're having. Right. But in terms of his Instagram, he's got more followers than me, like all of this stuff. And from a lifting standpoint, he's really just getting started. Right. He's not putting up anything, world record level at all. So time is the only thing that people get frustrated with, because I could go see that and be like, oh, like maybe I should just make videos like that. But then it's like the monetization strategy for him is going to be very different than a personal brand, because people aren't clicking to watch him, they're clicking to watch those videos. Now, you can monetize that. There's a lot of ways to do that because the audience is interested in old man, strongman training and stuff like that, right? So you have to cater towards that, which luckily he's obsessed with that stuff. And so it's right up his alley. But my point to that is that, like, you could, just because the ocean doesn't move, just because there's no waves in the ocean doesn't mean it's not moving. And that's like the hard thing sometimes. It's like you feel like you're against this brick wall. You feel like you're pushing. And I think, like, for some people, it's like PRs are like this, right? Like you're pushing and you're pushing under the barbell and you go to the meet and you miss. And you're like, what the fuck? And then you go to the next meet and you miss again. I remember my first 1,000-pound squat. I think it was like 5 or 6 meets, and I went down and up with it a bunch of times, but red lights for depth, red lights for this, you stumbled at the top. It's like, oh my gosh. And you just keep coming back to it, knowing that it's like the work will pay off. It's so frustrating in the moment because you see, I've seen kids who, start training, boom, they're hitting numbers that other people took 10 years to get to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, that's the way of the world. Some people, it's easier than others, but the common denominator is that those who continue to work towards it, continue to figure it out, they always seem to end up in the same place. It just might take them longer.
I think that's with all my guests, I always try to talk about, especially the first time they're on, like how long have they been doing this? Because I think people completely miss the concept. And I know I had Wenning on, and Wenning got stuck at a 500-pound bench for years. When JM was on, he talked about getting stuck at certain weights for years. And like, I know people are like, I'm going to put 200 pounds on my bench the first year. I'm like, all right, dude, you need to readjust your goals a little bit, because what you're thinking doesn't happen. I mean, but like you said, it might happen for some people.
Well, it depends, right? Like, if they say they want to add 200 pounds and you go, okay, you're going to gain 100 pounds of body weight. You're going to get on super supplements and we're going to put you in gear. Now we've got three things that probably are going to get you to it. But
Right.
if you're going to be the same in a year in terms of body composition, what you eat, how you train, like adding 200 pounds is probably unreasonable, right? So
Yes.
it's all relative, and I just think that like that's kind of, I imagine that's the most difficult thing. Like it's easy for us to know what it's like to not wear gear because we warm up. Even if you wear gear every week, you don't warm up in your gear, right?
Mhm.
Very few people are putting a bench shirt on with the empty bar, right? Like
Yeah.
so they have an understanding of what raw weight feels like. The other way doesn't happen, right? Like if you've only ever lifted raw, you have no idea what gear is like. So you're allowed to, like your mind or whatever, you'll create these perceptions, you'll create these stories, whatever you want, because you've never actually tried it. But I think like now more than ever, what I see like is top guys realizing that for longevity in the sport, they've got to train differently, or they need to wear, like they need something to support the hips, and things like
Hmm.
that. And so I think that's where you'll start to see people crossing back over because it's very difficult to push the limits raw for very long periods of time, in my experience, like, and there's always the people
But I
that
think that I
the
think that
anomalies,
also
but
goes back to how you train. If you're continually keeping that base strong and you're paying attention to your technique and your movement patterns, I think you can go a long time.
yeah. Well, that's one thing. Like when I was at Westside, so I've been 308. And I realized the reason I haven't lost weight is because I was a 308 lifter. My identity is a 308 lifter. So why would
Hmm.
I not just maintain being 308? Like so, it's like you can't have the goal of benching 1,000 and losing weight. Like it doesn't coexist with each other. So like the 1,000 won out, right? Because that was more important to me. So, but my point is that when I was at Westside, I weighed my biggest was 320, but I mostly walked around about the same weight, like 312, like that was and then I would just not eat the night before, test my weight. I would just need to go to the bathroom and I could weigh in, I'd be 308, right? It's like
Hmm.
the easiest weight cut ever. So I've been walking around the same weight, but I'm not carrying it the same way at all. And my mobility, flexibility is night and day. Like I couldn't even like I remember when I started doing the bodybuilding, right? In 2014. Like I couldn't do a side pose, like tricep side pose. I couldn't get my hand behind my back. But now every day I'm stretching my shoulders out. It's like
And you
it's like
wonder why your shoulders hurt.
but to your point, it's like as you get older, everything, the way you train, the things you do. And people are like, well, would you have done mobility back then knowing what you know now? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. Like the if the less like you always the least amount of work to get the most amount of results, right? Because that's gonna bring your recovery, you're gonna have more time to recover, you're gonna have more time to this, more time to do that. So like the truth is I didn't need to do that stuff back then. But now I need to do it. And
See,
so the
I'm
crossover, like,
completely
but like,
different.
I'm not going to spend an hour warming up before I started training back then. I didn't need it, right?
Yeah.
Now I need longer, right? And I think that it's
Why
it's like
though?
knowing the right things to do. Could I benefit from some stuff? Absolutely, but you don't need to be doing the same kind of things in your 40s as you were doing in your 20s. Just like you don't need to do in your 20s what you need to do in your 40s.
See, I have a very there's always more mentality. So you go, oh no, I got to warm up now. I'm 52 years old. When I bench, I go out and start throwing plates on. Like
Really?
yeah, there is no this huge long warm up when I even though at my back now, my back's getting better. I'm starting to squat again. I go out and start squatting.
Because you're just warming up under the bar. But you're a very flexible person. You
Yeah, but
always
I
have
always
been
that's
very
what I'm
flexible.
saying is it that you're older or is it that you're too beat up? And what if you did go back? Like I would if I could go back with the same knowledge I have now, my training would be completely different.
It's hard because
I mean, I
I
don't
don't
think I
know.
tapped into even close to what I could have done.
I think I would have had longer longevity.
Mhm.
That's what I really believe. I don't know if my results would be any different, but I don't think I would have quit when I did. And I think because for me, you know, I wasn't healthy and I wasn't doing it healthily. Like I didn't know how to maintain my weight without junk food. When I went to a clean diet, I lost too much weight. So I ended up 3 clean meals a day, 3 dirty meals a day. That was kind of
Yeah.
the hybrid I figured out. Um, and so I think that like I if I had someone doing my nutrition specifically for me, if I was getting blood work, if I was doing all this stuff, I think I could have had longer longevity. But again, it's like
Well,
I don't know if
longevity
I'd
means
lifted
you would have
more,
had more time to probably get stronger.
but I'm not sure if that's true. I mean,
That's the problem is we can never actually know. It's still,
yes,
I tell
yes,
people this all the time because people think that they're like, well, you're so confident. And I go, I can't tell you what's right or wrong. I don't know.
yeah,
I can give you my best idea right now of what I think. And I mean, I do know for a fact that of all the mistakes that I did make, one of the things I did good was I always kept some mobility up. I always kept some flexibility up. I probably should have done more. I think that's a huge reason that at 52, I can go out right now and go bar for a couple reps, throw some plates on for a couple reps, and I'll be at 315 and see how many I can hit.
yeah,
There's
yeah. And I
times when
think
I'm training and I got a client at 225 and I'm like, God damn it, you're doing this. I'll lay under the bar totally cold and do that. I don't have any
yeah,
problems.
yeah. And I think it was one of those things that it's one of those things where it's like nobody worries about prehab. They just worry about rehab, right? So I think
Yes.
it's one of those things that like when I was younger, I probably would have had good to have some prehab type stuff in there to like keep healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I really walked a tightrope of like, okay, this muscle could snap or it's going to be really strong.
Yes.
And like,
Yes.
and so it's one of those things where it's like, it's a toss up. But, one thing I can say is that like, I mean, I never got injured really when I was competing all those years. Like I had some compression in my spine that caused, like after I would squat, I would like basically drop to my knees, and then once the compression relaxed, I could stand up. So I had that, but we
Do you
fixed
know
that
do
with
you know
reverse
why
hypers,
though?
just compressed discs. Um,
Well,
you
I mean,
know,
was it was there something where they was it just compression of them being perfectly lined up and on top of each other, or was there a little imbalance or a little flexibility issues that was twisting it and making it worse?
yeah, I don't know. Louis just had me on the reverse hyper 4 days a week, and it went away after like 2 months. So it was kind of like I just trusted. Like I didn't like doctors back then. Like they always telling me I
I don't
shouldn't
like
lift
them
and stuff.
now.
They're always telling me I shouldn't lift and stuff. So I never liked that. But I think that's kind of the thing. The thing that's interesting to me now is like I always want to make training as easy as possible. And one of the ways I found that is that when I have other people around me, like if I'm in a bad mood, like I can't be rude to my training partners. Sometimes I'll come in and they'll be like, "Hey," and I'm like not in a great mood, and I know that, and I'm like, you got to be, you can't be like this. Like you got to snap out of it. I got to change my
Hmm.
energy, right? I got to change the way I'm thinking, or at least be decent to them, right? Because
Hmm.
I want them to show up, right? I care. I genuinely care about them,
Yeah.
right? So that also they call me out on shit. Hey, you did this, you did that. Hey, like when we were releasing the bar, like, and these guys, they're not at the same level. They have not competed at the same level I have. They haven't had but they will still say stuff. They'll still say, "Hey, like you're falling to your right."
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So I have all this feedback, and then there's like times we do assistant exercises where I just want to go through the motions, and these guys will, I'll do something with a weight, and I expect them to not, and then they'll go and do the same weight as me, and I'm like, well, fuck, now I got to go up because like I'm stronger than them. I can't like just be a, you know or I got to slow it down. So like sometimes if I don't want to go up in weight, I'll just do like 5 second, like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
repping.
Yeah.
But my point is that like by having these training partners around me, it makes training a little easier in a sense that like no matter how I feel, no matter what's going on with me emotionally, like I have to show up a certain way. Like I have feedback. So I can't do stuff, I can't half-ass shit. Like I have a sense of pride. So if they're pushing, like I'm gonna push. That's what I think people are really missing when it comes to their training. Too many people, when they're working off of a spreadsheet that they got from their coach, and bear in mind, like, all they've got is a program. They're not getting
Mm-hmm.
coaching. I don't care what they say, unless the coach is on the phone with them and giving them feedback in between sets. They're not really, feedback on a video a week later is not very helpful. Because you got to remember that when you go into the gym, and
Well,
got to fix.
I think it's helpful. I don't
It's
think it's anywhere near as good as in
yes,
person.
yes, yes, yes. Sorry, on the scale of like what you're getting, right. Um, it's more beneficial than no feedback. Let's just say
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
So that's where I think people, like, with training and with environment, like, what people are missing is that, like, when you have a squad, the days you don't want to train, you can't not show up. The days you don't feel like pushing yourself, like like you can pull back, but you can still add value. So you can still turn it into a positive day. Or you might feel like you can't, like, you might feel, oh, I don't want to fucking do anything today. And then you get trained and you loosen up, you feel good because you showed up, because you were accountable to someone. And I think that that's kind of like the thing I like. Even if people don't train together because they're doing different programs, like, I encourage people, like, go to like, try to find a group of people that you go consistently at the same time with, that you build a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with. And I'll pull guys, and, like, but there's a group of guys in the gym, they don't train with me, but they'll help me if I ask them. you know
Right.
and I think that that's what this sport makes the sport great. But it's also what's missing a lot is, so many people train alone now, and they have the best coach they can afford, right? And a lot of these coaches are phenomenal coaches, but they're missing all the other things they could be getting out of their training if they had a squad or a crew or a group of people that they just showed up at the same time around, and they helped each other. And I think that, like, I think that's the like, more than the gear lifting and the raw lifting and the big meets. Like, that's what really I would like to see change in the sport, is just, like, more people getting back into crews, more people helping each other, because I think that, like, that camaraderie and that kind of thing, like, that just builds a foundation for this sport. It helps you as a lifter, and it gives you something beyond just yourself. So many people just train by themselves with headphones on, and it's like, to me, I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't get.
I I think I like that, but I think I go to gyms and I see teams and I see this what I call rah-rah bullshit, where they think that their only job is to pump that person up and tell them they're doing a great job. And I don't think that's a good team.
Yeah, that's the other
I
side of
I
it,
think a
right?
good team lets you know when you need to fix shit.
Yeah,
I
like,
think a
if you just
good
have a
team
bunch of
lets
people
you
cheering for
know how
you.
you're doing.
Yeah, like if your team is scared to give you feedback, it's not really a good team, right?
Yes.
If to cool, like, I mentioned this, I was talking to someone, I said something about squat depth, and a clip came out from that, and it was that, like one of the things with training partners is they can call you squat depth. And someone commented, yeah, but they have to actually call your squat depth, and then the judges have to call your squat depth too, right?
Yeah.
And I said, that's all true. Like, yes, you're better to have a training partner who helps call your depth if they're honest.
Yeah.
Like, and yes, you can use a box, or you can use something like that, but you need people who are going to call you out. You need people around you who aren't afraid to tell you when you're being a slapdick. But you also need to be careful that, and I saw this at Westside. I was lucky that I was one of the strongest. So I had my little group of guys. Greg had his group, and then that we would run them through. Then I had my group of guys. So I was kind of dictating what I did, right? I wasn't following Greg. I did when I first got there, but it wasn't working for me. And I talked to Lou, and he's like, well, if you don't want to do it, get a couple of guys and you can squat after. So that's what we went back to waves, because Greg liked to do speed work and then work up heavy. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I can't handle that. But one thing I observed, Greg, even though he worked up heavy, was always training optimally. He never was like, he wasn't maxing on those days. On days that we maxed out, Greg would win, but I don't know if it was really a max for Greg. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-mm.
Like,
Yeah.
he would do the biggest number and then shut it down. Other people were trying to keep up and beat him. So they were training, overtraining. They were doing
Yes.
too much. They were going to competition mentality, right? That level of intensity in training.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they go to a competition, they would crumble. Well, they wouldn't hit the
And
numbers they've done
that's
because they,
kind of where I would have held Greg responsible to go, don't let him do that.
well, I mean, he's just in that environment, right? He's just the lead. Like, I'm just going to lift as much as I can. It's up to you but my point goes back to what you were saying. Like, that's where a training crew could be bad, right?
Mhm.
Is if they see you as the king of the castle and all they do is cheer you on and they never give
I
you
mean,
that
I had,
critical feedback.
in my group, like you would come in and my group would start asking everybody questions. How you feeling, man? How's your appetite? Been sleeping good? And we were all trying to fish to see, well, how does this person really feel?
Yeah.
And it took me a long time, but I got to the point where I'd come in and Ethan would look at me and go, "You're not training today." And I'd be like, "Fuck off. I can fucking train today." Like, I mean, we had lots of fights before we got to the point where I'd be like, "Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to hang out and I'm loading plates and coaching, but I'm not doing anything."
Well, and that's why I've struggled with programming, right? Because it's really hard to scale one-to-one programming.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really hard to charge what one-to-one programming is really worth, right? Like if I'm giving you programming, nutrition, mental feedback, like all of this stuff, like it's very difficult to charge. Most coaches are charging $200 a month. That's what people are used to, but that's not like I'm not giving you a spreadsheet and then just you sending me videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I struggle to program beyond a week. And the reason for that is I
I
need to know
don't,
how it felt.
I program everybody week by week.
Yeah, I need to know how you feel. How did it go? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, did you recover? Did you get like, are you feeling tired? And so, like, to me, it's like, I can write a 12-week template.
Mm-hmm.
But if you and I are going through that together, chances are by the time we get to month 3, we ain't doing what was on that template,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're adjusting, we're changing, we're based on this. And yesterday, for example, my wife's getting ready for California's Strongest, and yesterday she was doing the circus dumbbell. So I mean, I jumped in because I'm kind of doing lots of base buildings, and I just thought it'd be fun, jump in, do the dumbbell press, and I mean, I pressed what she pressed, right? And I was like, man, this is really hard. But by doing that movement, I realized that it's very much the kind of a elbows out extension like
Mm-hmm.
this. I haven't done anything like that with her in her training. So it's too late now. Competition's coming up. We've gotten her really, really strong. It's not like she's making massive progress. It's great. But I'm by doing that movement, I suddenly realized, well, there's an exercise that we haven't been doing that I need to do with her. I've been doing a lot of compound stuff, not a lot of isolation stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't have realized that unless I'd done that movement, right? But now when I go back to her programming, I'm going to be looking at it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of feedback I rely on from the athlete too. Well, what do you feel like's not strong? Like, okay, you hit this, but what was the weakness here? Like, where did you get stuck? Okay, we're looking at this video and you move really slow off the floor, but you lock out really, really fast. So you're not really limited by your lockout power here. You're limited by
Yeah.
your off your floor power. Like, and then so then you're like adjusting it and you're adjusting it, and it's like, and then you try something for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you go, oh, that wasn't it. you
Yeah.
know, oh,
Yeah.
you got to switch it. And I think that's like the level, like guys
That's
like us
coaching
who
though.
obsess over it. That's coaching. That's the art
Mm-hmm.
of coaching. And, you know, doing that at a level, it's difficult. I still prefer in person. I still prefer being able to touch you during your workout to correct you.
I prefer in person,
to give you a PVC pipe. Nope, you should stay here.
like you said, you can react that day. Where in watching videos, the training session's already over.
Yeah.
Like I can correct you, but now over the long term, it's going to take way longer to fix something that I could have fixed much faster in person.
Yeah. Also, sometimes you think it's something, and then you'll I'm thinking about overhead pressing, right? With
Mm-hmm.
overhead pressing, like I'll be watching and I'll say, tighten your glutes up. Person would tighten their glutes up, and then now it looks completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're watching the video and it looks like they're leaning back, and you're going, oh, okay, like you need to do this. You might not guess right the first time.
Right.
So sometimes these are the kind of things that take into play. And I think that like powerlifting is very basic. You've got squat, bench, and deadlift. But when you actually look what goes into each lift is a full body lift, right?
Yeah.
the amount of people I see bench and I don't see their legs flex.
Ugh.
And I go, do you realize how
Yeah.
much stronger you could be if you could figure that out?
Yeah.
Then I see guys who lift who flex their quads before they push the barbell. So they're
Hmm.
like pump their hips, then they press. And I'm like, oh, your timing is off. You're like your chain of connection is off here, right? So when you look at it, like all of these lifts, as simple as they are, like the hand position, right? And this happened at the Arnold. So on the main stage for the Anderson bench competition, a lot of the lifters have had trouble touching. And it was, I know they were probably disappointed because the whole reason they did the format the way they did, which was your 3 lifts added together. So you got a total by
Yes.
benching. It was to avoid bomb outs, but a lot of the guys missed their first lift. Well, the reason was it was very basic. 2 things. Number one, the bench was 16 and a half inches max. There was no way it was taller than that. I sat on the damn thing
Hmm.
because it was on the floor. And they were like, hey, what does that bench feel like? And I sat on it. I go, well, that's really low. I go, if you got short legs, you're going to be okay. But I couldn't get it. I couldn't arch on this.
Hmm.
So immediately I knew that was going to flatten some people out, right? Because I can't maintain my arch on a low bench. I prefer a higher bench. 18 plus is perfect for me. I would love to see a 19-inch bench press. It's like, like I get real good arch on that. So that was thing number one. Number two, they used the new Magnum bar, right? Beautiful barbell. I held it before I tested. I wanted to see what it was like. I love it. It's fatter than the bench bar. Um, they've made it so Jimmy can go for the 1500 without the flex because he was getting a lot of flex with the bench with the F8 bench bar. So F8's made the Magnum bar, but it's a little thicker than a regular bar, right? And so I got big hands. I could still get my hands around it, but I noticed it sat differently in my hand, you know. So here we are, lower bench than they got in warm ups, different bar than they have in warm ups, and they come out on the platform and they struggle. And I'm watching, and sure enough, they're struggling touching because their range of motion was longer. Plus, they couldn't roll the bar the way they normally do because it was a thicker barbell. So it's different
Hmm.
wrist position. These are the tiny little things that the longer you go in this sport, you start to see they make massive differences. And so you can
Well,
see where someone's wrist, elbow, shoulder is, and you can say, well, if we do this, this, and this, we can see this much progress. And that's really where like I started to realize with strength is getting stronger is one piece of a big puzzle. And there's so many ways to get stronger, right? Like for a lot of people, a lot of strength gains as a beginner literally just come from learning how to recruit more muscle, not gain muscle. You don't need to gain any muscle. You just need
or
to learn how to recruit muscle to move the barbell in that range of motion. And so when you look at that and you look at all of these different things, this is where when you train alone, you miss all of this stuff because unless you are an obsessive person, now this is where everything I've said is not true. If you're an obsessive person and you film every lift you do and you analyze it after you do it, and you're intelligent enough to know what you've broken, and then you know how to fix it because
yes.
you have a level of intelligence, or you've been training long enough, or you're a really smart person, like you're going to be fine. But if you're not someone like that, like you need help. Like and it's not wrong to ask for help. It's not wrong to find someone and say, hey, could you watch this real quick and give me some feedback? Because, from rooting the feet in the ground on the squat and really twisting to spreading the bar to like all these different things that become second nature. Like I forgot a lot of that stuff. And coming back, that was one of the things that was shocking to me is how many little things I forgot that over time people would point out. Like you even mentioned something about my elbow at one point. You're like, hey,
Yeah, I think
like
I
I
mentioned a
normally do that.
few
And I was
things
like,
about all your videos.
yeah, and you're like, oh, you got to do this, you got, and I'm like, oh, like it's you just forget stuff. Like you
Yeah.
you can't
You
remember
had a
everything.
you had a long there was a you had a long stint in between there where you weren't powerlifting.
Exactly. And so, you know, if 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 someone who was a world all-time world record holder, right, can forget this stuff, someone who's never learned this stuff before, what hope do they have? And I think that's kind of like I want to see people become the best version of themselves, the strongest version of themselves. And so I look at it like these are all these things they could do. And maybe it's something that I'll eventually let go of.
Well,
But like
here's
I see potential in people and I want to help them reach their maximal potential.
oh, that's
And
the
it
huge
pains
trait
me
that I
when they
have.
they say they want it, but then they won't, their actions don't match it.
Yeah. So here's one of the things I always say. You have a window for error. When you're new, that window's huge and it's wide open. The better and better you get, the smaller and smaller, the more closed that window gets. To where you got a guy like Andy Bolton who, if he pulls and starts it and it don't feel right, he's just like, that's it. I'm not going to get it. Like it's just too precise at that point. And then you have like the same thing. I tell the story about going up to bench with Duffin up at Kabuki. And he's like, dude, you're not your lats. You're not using your lats. I go, dude, fuck you. I'm fucking Chad Ikes. I'm fucking engaging my lats. And so I go to bench one time and he straddles me and just digs his fingers into my lats. And I go, oh, okay. You're right. I got lazy. I was not using my lats.
Yeah.
So like if top guys can forget these little things, what makes a beginner think that he's going to remember them? And like you said, getting stronger, there's a lot of ways to get stronger. There's a lot of programs that'll work to get stronger. To me, building that base is getting that technique, understanding. And it's the same thing. You know, when I first started on Westside, we would do 3-week waves with the max ever movements. Because a lot of times it was a different bar, it was a different movement. Like the first week you suck because it's a new movement. The second week you're more familiar with the movement. By the third week you PR.
Yeah.
You know, you probably PR the second week and the third week, and then you switch it up. And like you said, that's recruiting more muscle. It's getting used to the movement. It's finding the positions. But with the team, I think that's the big thing is if you can have a team of guys that actually know. And so I think we talked about earlier, like you're doing your max effort and it just looks like shit. It's the guys in your team that are going to go, you know, I think you're just not paying attention. Let's try one more, but focus your ass on doing it right.
Yeah.
And then you get it. Or the guys look at it and go, dude, you're done. Like you're done today. That's it.
Yeah, that's like the biggest thing is telling people when they need to shut it down, because everybody thinks if they just try one more time, they're going to get it, especially if it's close, right? And sometimes it's like I'll tell my training partners, I'll say, look, it don't matter if you get it or not. It's not going to help you. Like there's no benefit. You almost got that weight. You were like, you know, you came up, it started drifting on you at the very top or whatever. I don't need you to do it again. Like, because you're fatigued, you could risk injury. If you miss again, what does that accomplish? If you hit it, it doesn't actually give us any benefit on a training effect.
Plus, it
Like, we're
takes
probably just overtrained.
thousands and thousands of reps to create a pattern.
Yeah. And so
Every
really,
rep you're doing that's not good is going against the creation of that pattern.
And I look at it like this, stacking wins. Like, one of the things I try to look back in my life, my whole life, not just lifting, and say, like, how did I end up as me? Right. And it's a very difficult question. But you look back and the dots seem to
interesting
connect.
question.
The dots seem to connect. But one of the things that I've been very fortunate in my life is I've always won more than I've lost. So in the gym, I found that when I shut myself down, when I was maybe could have done 5 more pounds, but I shut down, I finished on a win. And my rest of my workout would be very good. The days that I would miss weight and try again, I'd get so pissed off that there was no point me even doing assistant exercises because I was just in a bad, foul mood. Like, I was pissed off that I fucking missed the first exercise. And then I'm mad that I tried it so many times because I know that's stupid. But like, and then I'm just going through the motions. So the whole workout was wasted. And so what I realized was it's about, you need to, like, you want to consistently win in the gym, right? And the reason, and knock on wood here, because now I say it's probably, but like when I did Bench Monster TV with Ryan Kennelly and Ashley noticed that like I'd never bombed. She's like looking at my, now there's a bunch of meats missing, but like I went back and looked, and as far as I know, and remember, I have never bombed out of a meet. And I'm like, because I was never trained to open with a PR on any lift. Like I've always been trained to go 1-2 PR on the third. So most of my lifts, I would go 6 for 9 on a bad day, you know? And And so like even at meets, I was winning more than I was like I was hitting lifts more than I was missing. In the gym, I would hit more than I missed. And I'm like, that momentum carries over. But it's about the energy too, right? It's about the adrenaline, it's about the emotion, it's about all of that stuff that goes in. That goes back to the mindset stuff that you and I absolutely obsess over. But it's like I've done that since I was a kid. When I was playing basketball, like I was like I was traveling to play like for a London team an hour away every week, practicing and everything like that. We would win more than we would lose, right? So I believed I was a good basketball player because I was always on winning teams. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just that's where I got lucky in life, right? But what I've realized is if I want to continue success, I need to put myself in environments where I'm winning more than I'm losing. And the reason I've been successful is I'm often more right than I am wrong. Like, but it's my decisions and the way I do things is based on my experience. It's based on the depth of my knowledge. And so the reason I'm a constant learner, the reason that I have this beginner mindset is because I feel like the more I can expand my base of knowledge, right, the more educated the decision could be. So I'm always trying to look at it. Like when I was at Westside, I remember block periodization came out. You know, Jeremy Frey started like post came part of Team EFS with us, and he was doing block periodization. Where does this come from? There was a seminar. It was like 12 DVDs, and literally, I think it's Russian, Dr. Brunjek, Russian, and then the translation, and it's the most boring because like you're listening for like 5 minutes in Russian, and then they translate it. Um, I went through the whole thing, and I suddenly was like, wait a minute, block periodization is periodization just in a much shorter format. And he even talked about it. The reason it came about was because steroids became illegal at the Olympics. So they had to start using shorter ester steroids so they could cycle it in and out of the system quicker. So their whole training cycle went from 4 years to you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so this whole premise of this started around this structure. But then they got to talk about phases. They're talking about phases like GPP phase, hypertrophy phase, like, and I started thinking, wait, do we do phases at Westside? And I started realizing we had GPP phase, which was like post meet, right? For like the month after a meet,
Mm-hmm.
you pretty much are doing sleds and high rep stuff. You're not really, maxing out on stuff anymore. And then we had speed strength phases. We had strength speed phases. We had circummax. We had and I was like, wait a minute, we have phases. So I started talking to Louis about this stuff. I started realizing, like, wait a minute, he's not actually saying that much different. Like the application is slightly different, but it's based on the same theory. And
Same
so
principles.
yes, and so I start like I will learn from anybody. And I think that like when I came back, I remember I signed up for Jimmy's Patreon, and he's like, "Why are you paying me?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I've never had a top lifter join my Patreon before," and I was like, "Because I want to learn from you. Like you said, you had a seminar on there. Like I want to watch the seminar." Like, and Jimmy doesn't believe in speed work. I didn't throw speed work out, but I started thinking to myself, is speed work helping me? And so, you and I have had this conversation. I think it's my age. I'm also a very explosive lifter, so I can get away with not doing speed work every week.
Yes.
Like I've focused more on the bamboo bar because with that band shirt, I get a lot of this.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to create this in my training, and I'll do rep work with the bamboo bar. I'll do submaximal loads, but I'll still do speed, but I'm not doing it every week because it was just beating me
Mm-hmm.
up. Just like I can't go in the shirt every week. But that concept, Jimmy opened my eyes to like, wait a minute, this guy trains heavy twice a week. And then I remembered Louis said to me one time, AJ, if you can train heavy every day, you should. The guys who can train heaviest the most often will always be the strongest. And he referred to the Bulgarians. He said they would train 6 times a day. I mean, what? Yeah, they would train, they would eat, they would sleep, they would come back, they would train, and they would just train in nonstop, maxing out all day long, every day. But he explained, they put these kids through this, and when they're young, these intensive camps, and it was basically the kids who can survive that is the one that they took into training. So they weeded out a whole population of people to get the specimens that could handle the load. But he basically said the person who can train the heaviest and most often is always going to be the best, because if you can recover from that, you can improve quicker than the other person. The
Yeah.
conjugate system, the beauty of that was we were squatting perfect reps every week, you know,
Would
52 weeks a year. We were lifting heavy. So it was it's the perfect everyday program. It's even better for athletes, I think, than powerlifters. But when I start looking at the principles, like, and I remember reading Science of Practice of Sports Training, and they basically talk about maximal effort work, repetition work, and like dynamic, which is explosive training. And I go, oh, I'll be damned. Louis didn't invent this. And then I read in Super Training, and they talk about all these different phases. I'm like, I'll be damned. Louis didn't invent this. And it's like you start realizing that like these concepts that people are so oh, that doesn't work, this doesn't work. It's like, listen to these people. They all say the same stuff. They just presenting it in a different way. And it's presented differently, especially if they're trying to sell something, right? And I'm even going through that, right? Like I'm teaching this stuff, and I'm like, well, do I keep calling it conjugate? Because like my version isn't the same as Louis's version. Do I kind of come up with my own name for it and like always give credit? Like, because it's like it's not the same, but it is the same. But it's like at the end of the day, it's not me discrediting them if I call it something different. It's just me adding my own thing to it and being like, okay, like this, like I don't want to, you to think this is the same as that. But my point is that like when you look at the interview Louis did with Boris Shoko, it's like they actually agree on more things than they disagree on, and you go, oh, okay, like this isn't as complex as we make out.
See, now you're in my ballpark. I love breaking things down to the very minimalist. The fact of the matter is you have to stimulate growth. You have to recover from that training. Then you have to let your body grow. If you can do that super fast, fucking A, let's do it super fast because you're going to get faster. Yeah. But you can't rush it. If you rush it, you mess it all up. And like, again, conjugate is an outline. If you're super explosive, I don't want to spend a lot of time making you a tad bit more explosive. I want to spend time on your max effort and your rep strength. And if your max strength is really, really good, but you're slow as shit, then maybe let's focus on speed and repetition. And it all has to change in the person. And that person might change where what you're doing with them this first year, maybe now all of a sudden they're explosive as hell.
Yeah.
Okay, well then now I need to go move it to max effort.
Usually when people discredit something, they say, oh, I've seen this. And they explain it. And I go, well, that's not how I understand the conjugate system to be. If you want to break it down, like at the end of the day, conjugate, what it really means is just the rotation of exercises. That's really what it means.
See,
concurrent is the training system, which is you're training multiple stimulus simultaneously versus, where periodization, you do phases where you train, okay, we're going to build muscle here, then we're going to build strength here. Whereas, concurrent is we're going to do it all we're going to raise all tides simultaneously. But when you look at it, it's like, I don't really, in my opinion, like if your workouts are literally every time you work out is just squat, bench, and deadlift, there is a limit to that. Because you have in every
fixing weak links.
Well, if we break it down, every movement has a primary mover, a secondary mover, and supporting or assistant muscles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tendons, ligaments, etc. So if you only do those 3 lifts every time you go to the gym, which some people do, right? And then they stagger the percentages and the loads and all of that, fine. And people get stronger doing it. So I can't say it doesn't work. But the flaw I see in it is if you're primarily training the same muscles all the time, which you are, right? Those supporting muscles might not be as strong as they need to be for you to move up, right? Mm-hmm. And strength often isn't this like, oh, we need to get our squat 50 pounds stronger. Sometimes like you're not firing your glutes. And if you can just learn how to fire the glute and get it to activate, right? And you can turn it back on, all of a sudden you get that 50 pounds on your squat and you didn't get an ounce stronger. You just fix the weakness in the chain. And now, and so that's the thing with strength. It's a puzzle because it's not like when you say, I want to bench 100 more pounds, you don't actually have to get all of your muscles 100 pounds stronger.
Yeah.
And that's the like the thing that's not black and white with strength, right? Like you literally can do and I was saying this yesterday, like I could build my overhead pressing power. I do not find any carryover to my bench press. None.
But I know people that do.
But there is people that do.
Not me. Right? I mean, my military was pretty good when my bench was good, but
yeah.
And I had times where I benched great and my military sucked.
my high incline military press has always been terrible. So when I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start pressing overhead more. And I've pushed my numbers up, no carryover to my regular flat bench press. So, but like you say, some people do. My point to that is I've gotten stronger, but it didn't carry over to the main lift.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's movements that do the opposite of that, where you get super strong and all of a sudden your main lift goes up ridiculously. And I remember when I went to Westside, my best bench press was 735, and we're doing max effort. Tony Balgoni was with me. I beat him on the max effort. I can't even remember what it is. What I do remember is we went to do dumbbells, and we're doing tricep extensions, rolling extensions, Canelli presses like this, right? And he picks up like the 120s first set and does 20 reps. And I knew that I couldn't do 20 reps at 120. So I like picked up the 80s, and I think I did like 12 reps. And I was like, holy shit. Like, and Tony had benched 800 in competition. I immediately was like, well, I just beat him on max effort, but he just kicked my ass on tricep extensions. So clearly that movement over there isn't the reason he benches 800. This is why he benches 800. And tricep extensions was something I never really did because I was, I mentioned earlier, Sebastian taught me how to bench. So I was big on board pressing for my tricep work, do a lot of boards all the time. And I wasn't doing any extensions. I would do push downs, like, stuff like that, but nothing heavy. And at Westside, that's what I did. I did tons of extensions. And that's what really made my bench press go up, just that one thing. And a lot of people didn't want to believe that when I told them. They're like, how's your bench going up so much? I was like, extensions, tricep extensions. They didn't want to believe it, but it was because I'd never done it before. And all of a sudden, I'm getting that muscle stronger. And then that's what you want. You want to be able to find these little things, right? Like if you can just find this little thing that's going to get you that much stronger,
and
it's like, wow,
That's where everyone's different. And that's where I think those are the great coaches, the coaches that can set all the standard rules to the side and go, listen, I can figure out what this is. And speaking of the squat, bench, deadlift, I knew some of Gary Frank's team. He had what I would personally consider some of the dumbest training ever.
I heard
he was one of the greatest of all time.
Didn't they just train Saturdays? They did all three lifts and they'd eat pizza between each lift.
It would be like a 6-hour training session, and he blew the world record away multiple times.
Yeah. So go back to what we said earlier. Big Iron trained in their gear a lot more than us, a lot heavier, and they broke tons of records. So again, that's why I say, like, I say stuff and sometimes I don't realize that the audience might take it as like, I believe this 100%. Like I realize most of what I say is like, it's limited to the environment you're in. It's limited to how you're applying it. Like it doesn't apply to every single person. And I think that's where, like, take nutrition, for example, this whole argument, calories in, calories out. Well, if the body is 100% working the way it should, it is just calories in, calories out. But when you start to get into hormone deficiencies, you start to get into like all this different stuff, the body doesn't work normally. It's not calories in, calories out. Because the truth is that if you eat food that causes inflammation and all this stuff and like, like affects the way you sleep or like that all plays a part. And so we want to simplify everything down and say, okay, like this is the basic thing. Like you just do this, you get stronger. But like to your point, like everybody has different leverages. Everybody has different limitations. Like when you get two people, even if you got two people at 12, those 12 years before affect, like all the way back to were they bottle fed or did they drink milk from the mother? Like did they drink formula or did they drink? That's going to change the way someone's bone structure is. That's going to change their health system. What were they exposed to early in their life? Was there any injuries they had? Was there any disease? Was there like, did they break any bones?
Some people this food could cause inflammation for them. For some other people, it doesn't.
100%. So that's the level of complexity you get to. So there is basics. And the basics matter and it's good to understand them. But it's kind of like, I've always said this, there is the perfect way to squat, right? Research has shown us that when you squat wide, you engage more muscles, you have more power output. The research has said that, not me. This is the research, right? But the reality is that not everybody is successful squatting wide, because the way their hips are made, the way their hips are beat up, the joint, the muscle structure, maybe they're quad dominant. So squatting wide isn't the best thing for them because it doesn't maximize the strength that they have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's the perfect way, and then there's reality, which is every deviation from that. And we're never going to get anybody to be perfect, but we were trying to get everybody as close to that as possible.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is you
I,
look at their body, you look at the way they train, you say, what's missing? What do we need to work on? And it's
well,
what bodybuilders have done forever.
to some
Like they look at
extent,
their body and go, how do we get it bigger? How do we get it wider? How do I make my waist look smaller when it's not going to get smaller? Right? I got to get bigger shoulders, right? It's just this game of piecing the body apart and breaking it down. And that's where a real coach comes into play. That's
I think that's where a real coach comes into play. But I think that coach can also help kind of relay some of those messages and help with the understanding of why we're doing this. See, I love your idea of groups, and I would love to take that into the online. I have a client, Bo, and his son, I think he's 13, maybe, Hudson. So when I'm reviewing their videos, I'll hear Bo, like sometimes I watch their video and I'm displaying it and I'm talking like over their video so they can see that. And I'm like, hey, he needs to sit back more. And then like a couple seconds later, I'll hear his dad go, you're not sitting back enough, or you're not rooting enough. So I know that they're learning, and I get way excited when I hear Hudson critique his dad.
Yeah.
And he's right. So even though I can't work as fast as I can with somebody in person, when I have 2 or 3 people in an online group, I can make better progress than one person, because if they're learning as they go, they're helping to coach each other, which I think is one of the best ways to learn, is to coach someone.
And I think, back to your point earlier when we talk about groups, and you talked about the negative side of a group, right? If they don't call you out, if they just cheer you, like that's something I think anybody that trains groups, whether you're a high school coach, collegiate coach, personal trainer, small group boot camps, whatever it is, you need to understand that if you are the only coach, you have a problem. Every single person in that room should be able to coach. So your job as a coach, if you're in charge, if you're a head coach, in my opinion, and Louis did this is at Westside, we all coached. Every rep was coached. There wasn't a single rep that happened in that gym without hearing 1 or 2 voices. Sit back, knees out, chest up, just cues. You need to get your people like that, especially like in high school and college. Like those athletes, by the time they graduate, they should be able to run that class themselves, right? Because the reality is you don't have eyes everywhere. You can't see anything. Plus, like they hear it differently from different people. People say things slightly differently.
They cue differently.
Right. And someone might, I might say arch, and they're arching it like on a bench press, arch, and they're arching their lower back, and someone else might pinch your shoulders together. We just said the same thing, but it's going to be perceived differently based on what your level of intelligence is.
And think about this too. This was great when I had my team. Maybe somebody is not pinching their shoulders. So I'm kind of focusing on pinching their shoulders. And I think we all kind of do this. You get focused on one thing, but it turns out he's not rooting his feet for shit.
Yeah.
So luckily I got 4 guys watching him. And between the 4 of us, we're probably going to pick everything or see most everything.
You want to transfer your knowledge to your crew. And like, you can't do it all the time. Like there's like things that you're not going to be able to explain, right? I remember Louis would say stuff and I'd be like, what makes you say? He's like, I don't know. I just know. And it's like, well, that doesn't help me. But, he's been doing it so long. What you come to find out, sometimes you just know stuff.
Yes.
Like I can watch someone's lift and I can call their next attempt and I'm right 99% of the time. Like I know exactly what they can and what they can't do just because I understand bar speed. Like I can watch something and I know what percentage of that is based on how fast that barbell moves. Every now and again, you're surprised because they fucked up somehow. They weren't tight enough. They weren't this, they weren't that. So you call them and they blast the last one up. And you're like, where did that come from? Right. Or they weren't worked up or whatever. But in general, like, and that's just come from years and years of watching people lift. Like, it's just, I couldn't tell you how I know that's 90% for you, but I just know that's about 90% right now. But like, I hope to make every single person I train with coach, like a better coach themselves, because I believe that if they understand the way things should be from a coach's standpoint, like then it's easier for me because I like they know what they should look
Mhm.
like. You know, just because they don't do it when they're under the bar doesn't mean they can't coach it, right? Like because oftentimes, I mean, I've done it. I get under the bar, I think this is gonna be a great rep, and then something stupid happens, and I'm like, well, I forgot to squeeze my lat, or like I
Yeah.
wasn't spreading the bar.
Yeah.
Like it happens. There's so many things going on. So yeah, I think that's like the other thing with groups. If you can make it so everybody is a coach in the group, so you take some pressure off of you,
Plus, I
but like
think
it should never be silent. It should never be silent, and it should never be cheerleading. Like
like
those are the
I've had a couple of training partners that just were mechanically really intelligent. So I can see all the different stuff that I came up with when I was competing. It wasn't me. It was me and them. And like it's fun to take somebody like I take somebody who's never lifted. I teach them what I know. Well, they came at it from a completely different perspective. So they could come up with shit I never even thought of.
yeah,
You know, so it's cool. Like my team was cool because we would literally sit and talk about stuff. And like you know me, I like to think all the time. Like I would have my team, we would sit around afterwards and go, "Hey, Scott's man, I don't think his squats coming on like it should be. What do you guys think?" And then everybody's coming with different ideas and different perspectives. And you know, maybe there was a time where somebody would get stuck in a position, and I'm visualizing how the body's moving and how the muscles are moving. And I'm like, wait a minute, what exactly is this? But because Ethan was so good mechanically, he's like, no, it's this and this. And I go, oh, yep, that's right. You're right. We got to strengthen that. And I think that's cool to have that camaraderie and that blending of all these people coming from different places with different perspectives to look at to find a solution to a
yeah, yeah.
problem.
Because a creative versus an engineer are going to think very differently, but they
Yes.
both are necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So like creatively, I know how we could do this and what movements we could do, da 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 da. But from an engineer standpoint, they're breaking it down differently. They're looking at it differently, like you said, from a mechanical standpoint, from a movement standpoint, and they're the way they see something is going to be different. And like you say, it only makes you better when you can look at it from different things. Everybody learns
Mm-hmm.
differently. Some people are audio visual. Some people have to read
Yep.
something. Some people have to be told 100 times. Some people respond differently. Some people need positive feedback, negative feedback. So when you have a group of people, you kind of get all of that. And so it kind of hits all
Yeah.
those nails on the head. And then as you get to really know each other, you kind of learn what the right motivator is, what the right cues are, those kind of things.
And
But
even
nothing wrong with the same cue three different ways until the person gets it, you know?
mhm.
Nothing wrong with that.
I switch cues up when I tell people because I'm like, man, they're not getting it. I need to say it in a different way. And then eventually they get it. But
Yeah.
another interesting thing is earlier when you were talking about um, like always winning in the gym, basically. I'm the opposite. Nothing has ever come easy to me.
Oh,
Like
you make the gym hot. Well, yeah, I see what you're
everything
saying.
has been hard for me my whole life. And like I had a dad who's a great natural athlete. My brother was an awesome natural. I suck. I got to work at every fucking thing I do. So for me, and even in training, I had no problems. If I barely got 400 and I'm like, yeah, but I want to feel 450. Let's put it on. I don't care if it crushes me. Like it does not phase me at all. So like the fact of I'm like, if I learn something, I bombed out of meets and I went, you know what I learned? And it's a win to me. I don't give a
Yeah.
shit what you say. I don't care if I'm
You view,
leaving with a trophy.
but you view it as a win. You didn't view it
I
as a
view it
loss.
as a win.
So that's like I think it's so important because like right there just showed that like two very different like mentalities produce similar outcomes, right?
Yeah, because like you
And
just said, if you break it down, we both won. Because to me, I learned something, so it was worth it. It was a win.
yeah, the way your perception of it, but also the common denominator between us is obsession with the with perfection. So
Mhm.
like you would analyze like you missed, but it was to learn something.
Yeah.
You know, I was so obsessed that I was studying. Like I remember when in college when the sports psychology department said, "Hey, we want to study you," because I was, you know, hitting these crazy numbers. I said, "Sure." And then like, okay, they were like, "So, do you do any kind of like visualization or like mental imagery?" I go, "Well, Yeah, like what I do is like I watch YouTube videos and I watch like the same video like 100 times, and then I like put myself in the video in my mind, and I'll like run through the lift like 100 times in my mind, and then I'll go train like the next day, and they're like, "Wait, you just do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, doesn't everybody do that? Like, doesn't everybody study their craft? Like, because I started in high school, the year I wasn't allowed to play sports, like I would study game footage. I started with football, then it was basketball, and I would pick up on patterns that the other teams would do, and I would give it to the coach. So like studying the craft was something I was doing
Yeah.
in high school for completely different reasons. So it was like I was doing all of these things, like, and like it's like positive self-talk, like, yeah, I'm always telling myself, like, you fucking got this, let's go. Like, I'm always getting pumped up like that. And so it wasn't until they showed me you could train that stuff that it really became a powerful tool. But the truth is that like my obsession with with weightlifting started in high school. Like I was like, okay, like how do I do this? I read like 4 years of Bigger, Faster, Stronger magazines in like 3 months. Like
Mhm.
that was like I just would read one, give it back to the coach, get the next one. I was like, man, all these kids in Texas are really strong. Like what's going on down there? And then powerlifting was a huge piece of the Texas community, like high school powerlifting, like, oh, there's competition. So I created record boards for the school in wood shop class out of wood. I made record boards and carved like in a thing. We put it up, and my goal was by the time I graduated, I'll have every one of those records, and I did. I had every one or shared. I didn't have them all outright, but you know, this level of obsession that we share, that most lifters, powerlifters share, like that's like not everybody, obviously, because like we mentioned earlier, not everybody does this for the same reasons we do, but the top lifters all seem to be obsessed to some degree.
Yes.
There's no
I
question
just I
about
just
it.
wrote an article for Elite, and it was the number one common thing I've seen between all the greatest athletes that I know is they believe in themselves.
Oh, that's the
And
other
I
thing,
think
right?
it's
Like
like this, it's this obsession and this belief that I don't care how long it takes, I don't care what I got to do, I'm going to get there.
it doesn't matter what anyone else says either.
Yes.
Like I've seen this vision for myself. You can say whatever you want, but I believe I can do that.
Yeah.
You can call me crazy. You can say it's never.
Hmm.
I mean, I got a tattoo on my stomach when I was 18. It's I got my brother's name, Stanley. He passed away, and praying hands. And the guy Barry Johnson was the guy who did the tattoo. And I remember telling him when I was 18 that I was going to be a world record holder. I already decided. I already
Hmm.
decided that. And of course, he's my tattoo artist. He thinks I'm crazy, like this kid, like full of this cocky kid saying all this shit. And he followed my career. And I remember when I broke the all-time world record, which was, what, 8 years later or whatever. Like he sent me a message and he said, "Man, I've been following your career. It's like super inspiring. I never." He basically says like, when you first said it, I never thought you would do it. Like I just thought you were full of it. He was like, so it's super awesome to see. And I think back, I think I wonder how many people I said stuff to, and they just thought I was like absolutely loony.
Oh, probably all of them that you said something to thought, who the hell is this
Yeah.
guy?
And I just luckily I never believed any of them, right? Like I was like, nope,
Well,
I don't care what you
I mean,
say.
that is interesting too. 'Cause I was thinking about, this morning, I was actually thinking about this because I'm having a conversation with two other friends about expectations,
Mm.
and neither of them like the idea of expectations. And I'm not really the guy that, I don't like to read. In fact, I hate to read. I don't like studying books. I hate it, but I love to think.
Mm.
And I would rather hear something or get an idea from somebody and just contemplate it. I always say I'm going to let that shit percolate in my brain pan for a while. And so I've been doing that for 3 or 4 days with this whole idea of expectations. And then I'll message them and I'll go, what about this? Or what about this? Because I want to understand it. Like maybe I'm not right. Maybe they're right. So I want to understand it. But I was thinking about the original philosophers.
Mm.
And I go, these guys didn't have books to read from other people. They were the ones writing the books. But what they did do, from what I understand, is they got together and talked. And I go, dude, that's where the power is. The power is getting together with other people that like to think and just talking.
Yep. Yep. And they shared, they had schools of thought. They would educate each other, and the stories would get passed down through time. And you would become a stoic, or you would become a this, you'd become a that. And it wasn't a book that you read on the weekends. It was a philosophy of life.
Yes.
And I think that like when we look at the majority of um, beliefs that people have, it doesn't become like it's not woven into their life on a daily basis the way it should be. And
Right.
I think that that's why the world is kind of where it is right now,
I agree.
because because what I've experienced, and I can only talk about my own personal experience, but what I've experienced for me is that like the more I've separated my life and kept one thing over here and one thing over there, the more my life has tried to come back together, right? So
Hmm.
like you know, we can't fragment stuff. I've also found that for me that like when I'm not fulfilled and I'm not living in integrity and I'm like that's when I feel my worst, right?
Hmm.
When I and going into a meet, you asked about the Arnold thing too, was when I realized, okay, I got to push my weight up again. Part of me was like, but I don't want to do this. Like, that's not. This is why I didn't get into this for this. And so I pushed the weight up again. And as soon as I pushed the weight up, it's like I'm done after this, right? Because I know I'm unhealthy. I can feel myself beyond where I should be. Oh, I'm pushing myself. I'm going to the place I know that I need to go to that I'm not willing to go to anymore, right? Like I'm not willing to push the health. I'm not willing to do that. My blood pressure's a little high. I'm not happy about this, like whereas before I didn't care, right?
Right.
But the point is that I didn't care until I cared, and that's why I quit because I thought I'm going to die and I don't want to die, right? And so like now it's like this daily integration and this awareness and like I have these checks and balances and yeah, every now and again I slip into the old mentality, or I think about, oh, I could do, and we've had these conversations where I'm
Hmm.
like, just sometimes I just think I'm just gonna you know screw it, throw it all in you go for it. But the truth is that like as I started to really like integrate everything together in my life and understand what is important and like what actually creates a good life, and I still seek those answers, right? It's one of the reasons I'm working with JM is just to like he's in his 60s. He's
Yeah.
ahead of me. He was very similar in his 30s, and like I just want to be able to have conversation with him and get feedback and different viewpoints and like
Hmm.
have that. But it comes down to like it's like when you talk to somebody, as long as you're willing, as long as you're not closed on anything you believe, if you just think that, everything I believe is true, but at the same time, it's not true, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that like truth to you is not truth to somebody else based on
Hmm.
their life, their experiences. And I always try to think of it like, in war, there's two sides and both sides think they're right most of the time,
Almost
neither.
always.
Yeah. So when we look at that, you go back to what you were saying about the philosophies and things like that. I think that like what's missing is that like we don't integrate stuff. Like we know stuff, but we don't integrate it. And so it's like, as basic as the 10 commandments, there's 10 commandments. And I almost guarantee that 95% of people who call themselves um, a Christian, like do not follow those 10 commandments 365. And I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that's the reality of where we're at. And I think that these
I
things
think a
that we've been
large
given
percentage don't even really know what they are.
potentially, but I think like whether it's Buddhism or Christianity, Hindu, Muslim, whatever faith you have, it's basically like a roadmap for a good life, right?
Hmm.
And the reason that we struggle so much now is that we don't like we see like so few of us live to the principles that bring a good life. And it's difficult. It's difficult on a daily basis, and you have to fight for that, right? It's not easy anymore. The amount of distraction, the amount of temptation, the amount of stuff that's easy access for everything, right? And so that discipline that we've learned under the barbell, I think carries over, and I think it leads to these conversations because
Hmm.
like at the end of the day, we're like, okay, like I achieved this amazing thing and it matters to me and it matters to a few people, but it doesn't really matter to anybody else. Like
Yeah.
I could walk through pretty like let's take the Arnold for example. Coming back from the Arnold, I got stopped in the airport one time, and that guy just knows because he's a part of the elite crew. He was out at elite. He wasn't even at the Arnold, right? but my point to that is that like I just benched 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
there wasn't as there was probably 5,000 people at that airport, and only one of them could like he didn't even know what I'd done because he wasn't at the Arnold. He just
Yeah.
saw me and recognized me from table talk. So you know that's humbling, but it's also it brings to light. And JM said this like he asked me about my grandfather's grandfather. I couldn't even tell you his name.
Yeah.
So if your own family doesn't remember you, like there's a really good chance that like at some point you you're going to be a name that nobody really knows. So
Hmm.
the point to that is that like to your point about conversation and the thing like what we're all searching for is like no this things don't make sense right now. Like you know you look around and this doesn't make sense. Like how is it that people minimum wage is this, people make triple minimum wage, but yeah, their rent is 50% of what they make. Like it just like the way that you look at everything, the way the economy is and the things that are said and you just go, man, this is chaos, right? But I think it comes back to the fact that like these conversations, these schools of thought have been pushed to the side. And so, with the Romans, that you had the Stoics, you had, the deity, you had all of these different things, and then and religion, again, I'm not talking about being religious. I'm talking about like following a way of life, right? And I feel as if religion has been pushed to the side now, where it's like there's a lot of people who have no book or essentially they don't have a map on how to live their life. That's what's
Hmm.
missing. And we haven't come up with a new book. We haven't come up with a new way. We have, we're relying on something from a long time ago. And, the things that have come about since they're 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 a little out there. I don't want to say because I'll probably get on some list and then they'll attack me. But the new religions. But my point is just that it's kind of like anything where it's like you have to have a path. You have to have like a way, and if you don't have the answers, you got to go seek them. And I think that that's kind of you feel like you get closer, but the real fun on this journey is like that moment you learn something, you're like, and then you apply it and you get a result from it, and you're like, this is amazing. And it's
Yeah.
like in lifting, I get that when someone shows me a new exercise or like they do something different, and I'm like, oh, I've never even thought of this before, right? It's a new challenge, it's a new thing in life. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of behaving, and I think that like that's kind of the amazing thing with strength training and powerlifting specifically is that like you're constantly proving to yourself that you can be better. Like you literally like it's you versus a number. And there's no like, oh, I think I can do this. You either can do it or you can't do it. It's like it's a very black and white thing. Um, but it's so colored in the sense of how you get better at it. And
Yeah.
it's really a great metaphor for life, And
Well, I think what you just described, what we've been talking about this whole time of basically having an outline.
yeah.
That's what you're talking about. You're talking about
Yes.
having an outline for life.
Yeah.
The exact same way it works for powerlifting, it works for life.
Yeah.
So
And
here's
everybody has a different belief system and how that should be, right? But
yes.
there's not like this is the thing that like baffles me sometimes is like we're all trying to get stronger, but yeah, we want to argue about with each other about like like things that like the way you train is this right, is that right? Is if you're getting stronger, I would argue that whatever you're doing is working. Don't
It's
need to
working.
change it. You don't need to change it till it stops working. Like
Hmm.
it's that simple. Do I think there's a better way? Absolutely. Based on my experience, what I've seen, what I've done with others, of course. But like if someone comes to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing this and it's working really good, but I've been thinking about that." I always advise them like, "Hey, stick with what you're doing.
If it's
Like
working, don't change
it's
it.
working. It's
Yeah.
working. Don't change it." You know? I think that's it. Boredom is the hardest thing for people to handle, right? Like, one of the mentors I have in business said this a long time ago is like, do you think the Rolling Stones gets excited to play a concert? They're literally playing music they wrote like 30, 40 years ago. Like, you think they're very excited to sing that song one more time? Like, no. Like, you've heard of bands that like, or you've seen bands that like they do an album and then they like come out with another album. It's nothing like their first album, but it's everything they love, and it just bombs because I don't like that. And so they have a choice. We can either be career musicians and make money and do what the crowd loves, or we could follow our own personal, like what interests us, and be a musician. And so a lot of times they'll spin off another band, or they'll do a solo album and stuff like that. But my point to that is that, like, if what you're doing is working, don't change it just because you're bored of it. You know what I mean? Well, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay. Like, the most successful people I know do the same things for very, 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 very long times. Like, the routines, the way they go through their days, like the best writers I know do the same thing every day. You know, they get up, they write. It's that simple.
So I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to end this podcast now because I got some clients coming.
Oh, that's good. I got to get my kids.
This whole thing did not go the direction I thought. It's so interesting to me when we get to talking how it just goes, and it goes off on fascinating things to me. I'm getting to where I shouldn't even plan what we're going to talk about. Just go. Because I was going to get more down that whole, like, where you went to.
Oh, yeah.
To hit that 1,000-pound. But I think we covered all this. We just cool, awesome stuff. Yeah. So man, I appreciate having you on, dude. I would fucking have you on like every week. I think we could talk about shit.
We can talk more. Yeah. I love it.
Because it's so fascinating. And even I love the fact that we can have slightly different viewpoints and we can still talk about it and discuss it. And then we end up finding out there's more similarities than there is differences anyway. And I just think that's fascinating.
You learn that, like, you can't really change someone's mind unless they're open to change. So
yeah,
like, the way I view every conversation is that, like, I just haven't seen it from your perspective. So when you share a different viewpoint, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. Like, why do you perceive it like that? And that to me is like the curiosity that most people, if they took that approach and just like realize that, like, there's no real benefit in being right. You just, okay, cool. You proved to yourself you knew what you're talking about. Like, you didn't learn anything. There's
benefits in the learning.
Right. There's nothing to gain in being right. So if you can have your views, but then be open to hearing every other perspective, and then take that perspective from the viewpoint of that person, and you don't have to change your opinion, but it might make you see things differently. And if you can see things differently, then you can progress, then you can learn, then you can move forward. Right. So hopefully, with all our rambling today, people listening, like,
that's where I like to go. Different. Well, wait a minute. Here's how I feel. Like, why do you feel that way? Because it's like, I do want to know. I can't, like I said, I can't guarantee that everything I think is right. I'm going on my life and what I lived and what I learned. But at the same point, I know we don't know shit. I love quantum physics. We don't know shit.
Look, if we went and got dropped off in a third world country right now, everything we know is out the window.
Yeah,
we have to figure out a whole different life. So it's like you said, everything we know is just based on what we've experienced. That's it. That's really it.
Crazy. All right, man. Thank you again for being on. Congratulations on that 1,000. Dude, you came fast. You did awesome. Seriously. All right, AJ.
Thanks for listening to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast. For more information, please visit couragebarbell.com. Until next time.